the Atlantean mothership weaving the spider's web, sending lunar waves across the globe. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. This is Chris Gio. You are tapped into the truth frequency. It is December 19th, 2015. I have, of course, my lovely wife and co-host with me.
Good evening, everyone.
And tonight is the night you've been waiting for. Tonight is the night that made Art Bell quit his radio show. Yes, he was afraid of the subject that we were going to be speaking about tonight. The infamous debate between Stanton Friedman and Mark Sargent. And of course, I borrowed that intro from Mark. Mark does his intros way more clever than I do. But it was a good try, I think. What do you think, Mark? Was that decent?
I thought it was pretty good.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. I've been head deep in the Hottie Bove documents lately, and so I don't know if you've read those.
A little bit, yeah.
It is interesting. It really brings the lunar wave into a whole new perspective.
Indeed. So
tonight is going to be interesting. A lot of people have been waiting for this evening. What are your preliminary thoughts?
I'm sorry, what am I preliminary thoughts on what?
On this whole debate. Are you psyched up? Are you ready? Yeah, are you like Rocky?
Yeah, no, I'm very psyched up. It's cool. The world's greatest UFO researcher on the show, and when I started this thing back in February, never in a million years did I think that I'd be debating somebody like this at this juncture. So very excited.
I think it's going to be fun. I talked to Stanton for about an hour earlier today, and he's really excited. He actually debated Jay Weidner about.
Yeah, I listened to that one.
Did you? Okay.
Yep, listen to the whole thing.
I didn't get a chance to listen, so.
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts, Sheree?
Oh, I'm really excited about tonight. I think it's going to be a very interesting debate, but I think it's going to be one of the biggest debates that we've done on the show ever. I know that we've had debates before, but this kind of takes the cake.
I think so. The idea of flat Earth really is taking off thanks to people like Mark Sargent, Matt Boylan or Matt Powerlin, and many others out there. I'm seeing more and more people starting to talk about the subject, which I think is great. We just did a video on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/truthfrequency. We're calling it Geospirit TV. Geospirit is a woman's clothing line in Italy, and I found this out after I already bought the domain name. But you know what? It's just, that's what it is. It's Geospirit TV because we talk about the spirit of the world and the consciousness of humanity at the time. So we just put that out, and we're talking about how, in my opinion, it really doesn't matter if it's flat or round. What's important is that people are starting to question the very foundation of reality. And in my opinion, that is invaluable, and it shows that we're really starting to ascend to that next level of consciousness and next level of understanding. So we've got much more Geospirit TV, kind of a side project away from what we're doing here on Truth Frequency. So if you want to check that out, please do. You're welcome into our living room for some deep conversations.
Definitely.
And Sheree looks really cute on camera, too.
Aw, thank you.
Yes.
You do, too.
Oh, thank you.
Well, and I really like to kind of look at this as, instead of a flat Earth thing, I see it as alternative Earth shape theories or alternative construct theories.
We're going to break out of this prison, no doubt. We'll be right back. We have Stanton Friedman joining us right on the other side with Mark Sargent, and we'll be joining our AM and FM affiliates over at GCN, too. Don't go anywhere. One of the first things that we're taught in Western civilization is geography. Our parents sit us down in front of a globe and start pointing out the different continents and saying, this is where you live, this is where our city is, and this is the other side of the world, and the world starts to spin in one direction. And then you start to realize that it doesn't just spin in one direction, but it starts to move on its axis from one end to another. And then it also spins around the sun, and there's a constant rotation that takes place on the macrocosm and the microcosm as well, as above, so below. And we just kind of accept this, and we go about our day, not even thinking, about questioning the very construct that we reside in. But there seems to be either an awakening or people are really dumbed down lately, one or the other, because people are actually starting to question the very foundation of everything that they were taught. And that includes trying to dissect and decode the construct which we live in, our own environment, an environment that seems so inescapable because everything is supposedly so far away that it would take some kind of technology that is just out of our grasp to get to. But we will. Maybe your grandchildren will get there. Maybe your great-grandchildren. But you won't get there. And that seems to be the case through every generation. And I think this is the reason why people are starting to question the very construct, the world around us. It seems like a pedestrian question at first. I know the first million times that I was presented with the idea of a flat earth or the idea of an artificial construct, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing, and I thought it was a joke. It's got to be a joke, right? I mean, everybody knows that the earth is round. But when you open your mind and actually start to listen to some of the arguments being made against the globe, you realize that the globe starts to fall apart, and that the people who are proponents of a flat earth really aren't that crazy, and they're definitely not dumbed down because they've done some serious research into this. And so questions start to emerge, and as these questions emerge, we have to all put our minds together to get to the truth. That's what it's all about, is getting to the truth. Just recently, Mark Sargent, who is the filmmaker behind Flat Earth Clues and fellow host here on Truth Frequency, he hosts a program called Strange World, Thursdays, 9 o'clock Pacific time. I'm sorry, Tuesdays, 9 o'clock Pacific time. And he came across a Stanley Kubrick interview that allegedly showed Stanley Kubrick admitting to the moon landing hoax, to filming the moon landing. And then he realized shortly after that it was a fake. And he found the outtakes, and he posted the outtakes and said, hey, guys, this is fake, and drew attention to the fact that the interview was fake, even though it would have confirmed his belief in the flat earth, or at least it would have been a piece of evidence to use. But confirmation bias is thrown out the window when you're seeking the truth. And sometimes the answers don't take you to the place that you want to go, or even back up your own theory. But that's what we're going to do on the broadcast tonight. We're going to look for the truth, no matter where it leads. So there's a lot of people that have come to this broadcast tonight with a preconceived notion of reality one way or another, whether they believe the world is flat or the world is round. But it's important for all of us to remove all notions, all preconceived notions, and really seek the truth.
Definitely. And if and when, I'm not even going to say if, when we figure out what this construct actually is and how much land is involved and how, if we can actually leave this planet or not, I think we're going to come to our own Tower of Babel kind of moment where we try to leave or we try to break out of this construct and some kind of force stops us from doing so.
The powers that be may not like that.
Exactly.
We're traversing some dangerous territory here tonight. But this debate and a discussion, I wouldn't even call it a debate. It's going to be a discussion about the very construct. And we have a renowned nuclear physicist joining us this evening, and we're very, very honored. Stanton Friedman, who is a physicist lecturer, UFO researcher. He's a professional ufologist who resides in Canada. He is the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. He worked as a nuclear physicist on research and development projects for several large companies. He also graduated from the University of Chicago, earning a Bachelor's of Science in 1955 and a master's degree in nuclear physics in 1956. And Stanton was one of the first ufologists that I came across. I was telling him this earlier. I was 6 years old, watching UFO documentaries. It was back in the 80s, and it was always Stanton Friedman on, and Bob Lazar, too. And I just found out today, 30 years later, that Stanton actually debunked Bob Lazar and did a really good job by asking for evidence. And so Stanton has a really He's really has his finger on the pulse when it comes to these kind of ideas. So I'm really looking forward to this. Stanton, how are you doing, sir?
Well, I'm pretty good. It's pretty late back here, of course, for us old men, but what the heck?
Well, I'm glad to hear you're still going and still going strong from the conversation we had earlier. It sounds like you still have another 50 years to go.
Well, I figure I got 9. Both my parents lived to be 90, and I'm 81, so I got 9 more good years coming.
Excellent, excellent.
He says optimistically, you understand?
Excellent.
I had a heart attack a year and a half ago, so...
Oh, did
we
you?
didn't know that.
Sure. I had 2 stents put in and went on about my business. But it was kind of a wake-up call. I mean, I had a boring week in a hospital, but it was interesting to watch them pushing stuff through my veins.
Wow.
But, that's the first time I was hospitalized. I was 79 years and 11 months old. So that's doing pretty good if you never have to be in a hospital until you get to that age.
Well, are you sure you're up for taking on a topic like Flat Earth?
Well, yes, I think so. What the heck? What have I got to lose?
These kids these days with these ideas that the world is flat.
Well, yeah. I don't know whether that's really their idea or... it's one of several possibilities. Maybe it's curved the other way, but there are things to talk about. And I was surprised when I was doing some early research on this to find that, back in Columbus's day, everybody knew the world was round. What Columbus didn't know, he was lucky, was how big it was. He had the estimates of the circumference, diameter of the globe, if you will, were much too low. And so he set off without any ability to get to the real distance to India, which is what he was after, going west instead of east. They knew India was there. So if we just follow around on the globe, we'll get...
From the Atlantean mothership weaving the spider's web, sending lunar waves across the globe. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. This is Chris Geo. You are tapped into the truth frequency. It is December 19th, 2015. I have, of course, my lovely wife and co-host with me.
Good evening, everyone.
And tonight is the night you've been waiting for. Tonight is the night that made Art Bell quit his radio show. Yes, he was afraid of the subject that we were going to be speaking about tonight. The infamous debate between Stanton Friedman and Mark Sargent. And of course, I borrowed that intro from Mark. Mark does his intros way more clever than I do. But it was a good try, I think. What do you think, Mark? Was that decent?
I thought it was pretty good.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. I've been head deep in the Hottie Bove documents lately, and so I don't know if you've read those.
A little bit, yeah.
It is interesting. It really brings the lunar wave into a whole new perspective.
Indeed. So
tonight is going to be interesting. A lot of people have been waiting for this evening. What are your preliminary thoughts?
I'm sorry, what am I preliminary thoughts on what?
On this whole debate. Are you psyched up? Are you ready? Yeah, are you like Rocky?
Yeah, no, I'm very psyched up. It's cool. The world's greatest UFO researcher on the show, and when I started this thing back in February, never in a million years did I think that I'd be debating somebody like this at this juncture. So very excited.
I think it's going to be fun. I talked to Stanton for about an hour earlier today, and he's really excited. He actually debated Jay Widener about.
Yeah, I listened to that one.
Did you? Okay.
Yep, listen to the whole thing.
I didn't get a chance to listen, so.
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts, Sheree?
Oh, I'm really excited about tonight. I think it's going to be a very interesting debate, but I think it's going to be one of the biggest debates that we've done on the show ever. I know that we've had debates before, but this kind of takes the cake.
I think so. The idea of flat Earth really is taking off thanks to people like Mark Sargent, Matt Boylan or Matt Powerlin, and many others out there. I'm seeing more and more people starting to talk about the subject, which I think is great. We just did a video on our YouTube channel youtube.com/truthfrequency. We're calling it Geospirit TV. Geospirit is a women's clothing line in Italy, and I found this out after I already bought the domain name. But you know what? It's just, that's what it is. It's Geospirit TV because we talk about the spirit of the world and the consciousness of humanity at the time. So we just put that out, and we're talking about how, in my opinion, it really doesn't matter if it's flat or round. What's important is that people are starting to question the very foundation of reality. And in my opinion, that is invaluable, and it shows that we're really starting to ascend to that next level of consciousness and next level of understanding. So,
and covered, as I was going through them, I realized that everything that I had been trying to debunk for the last 9 months was moving forward and becoming clear, such as Antarctica and the shape of it, what Admiral Byrd was doing down in Antarctica in from 1928 until 1956, the atomic weapons testing that was happening in the upper atmosphere between the United States and the Soviet Union. And then really started focusing on who was trying to cover it up. And I won't belabor the point because I know we have commercials. But that was NASA when they were formed in 1958. And I know that Jay Widener, has always said that, NASA has been faking a lot of things. And I took it a step further. I said, no. NASA was created in 1958 to hide the world from us. And so when I put the clues out there, I honestly was really afraid that I had forgotten something. So I put the clues out there, and it was basically a challenge to the internet that said, you know what? I don't think the world is round anymore. Prove me wrong. And I kept waiting for the email or the phone call or the text that, someone would come forward and say, oh yeah, here, especially a scientist would come forward and say, okay, here's why it's round. Here's why it's a globe. Here's why it spins. Here's the proof. It's indisputable. You can shut up now. And here we are in December, 10 months later, and nobody's done that. To where now, and why has it resonated so much? Why have so many people getting on this? When I started this thing, I'll give you a perfect example. When I started this thing, when you typed in flat Earth into YouTube, you got maybe 40,000, maybe 50,000 hits. Today, if you type in flat Earth into YouTube, don't set any filters, it's about 2.1 million. Why? Why is that happening? And it's just amazing to see to where now. And part of it is because I made the clues easy to digest, easy for people to understand, especially the person on the street. And if you don't mind me saying, I may have even found a way to reduce it down even further so that everybody can understand it if you're trying to debate somebody like Stanton here. And that is the entire flat Earth movement really can be boiled down to one simple word: where. That's your T-shirt right there. Where, with a question mark on the end of it. Where should be the beginning of everything you ask. Where is the mainstream scientific proof that we live on a spinning ball? And I won't go into all the wheres. I've got a list of them in front of me. But that's where we are now. Where and why? It's like, here we are having this debate about flat Earth seriously, and I'm on with Stanton Friedman. It's amazing.
Excellent. Stan,
you
take
just
us away.
lost me on something. You're saying the Earth isn't spinning, but you know that if you watch the direction of the sun, it changes in a rather periodic, straightforward fashion, doesn't it?
Yep. You're absolutely. Let me. Just because you probably don't know, or you may or may not have watched the clues, but what I'm saying is we are living, and I know there's different models out there, in the movement, which shows you the type of enthusiasm that's out there. But what I'm saying is that we are living in a giant, called Old Testament firmament type structure, very much like the Truman Show, thousands of miles wide and maybe a couple thousand miles high. That was built by something or someone, you want to call it the divine, you can, and that we're living inside it. And everything we see is as artificial as a planetarium. That is my stance.
Okay. Are you saying what the wall, I don't know what else, the dome is, are you calling it a wall or a dome?
The upper structure, yeah, call it a dome. We want to use.
Is it a solid transparent solid, or
It
what
might
is
be a transparent solid. The elements that make it up. I mean, is it a physical element that we don't know about? Is it a heavy water? Is it a frequency? Is it a force field? Is it electromagnetic? We don't know. But what I can
Well, can
say,
stuff get through it? In other words, when you talk wall, you're saying you can't get through it unless you can.
well,
do
that's
something.
just it. I don't think you could get through it, and I'll play into your stuff because I'm a big UFO guy. I think that there are certain technologies that may be able to get through it. Let's say if you had a craft that had a unified field engine, maybe they might be able to get through it. Conventional aircraft, no. I don't think there's a chance that
And rockets not. You're
no,
saying.
nope. I'm saying that I'm saying that the moon and the sun are inside this thing, hanging over us like a mobile over a child's crib.
They're inside.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
moon and the sun both.
Yep. Moon and the sun both. Maybe I can just throw out a
So
rough.
this is a very large dome.
Very large, tens of thousands of miles wide, and at
Not
least
millions of miles wide?
Well, I mean, it could be. Jeffrey Grupp's model kind of made it out to be kind of like if you put a salad bowl over the top of a $50, to where there was a lot of room going off before you could actually run into the structure, which would make sense why it took Admiral Byrd 30 years to, in my opinion, find it. Why it took him so long. It doesn't take 30 years for somebody to find anything out in a frozen wasteland, I would think. But yeah, I mean, it could be. We don't know where the edge is. And that's where the difference in the models are. Matt Boylan thinks that there is no dome at all, and that the expanse stretches out for a long, long way. Other people think it's kind of concave. But for me, I go, old school firmament, from Genesis, and using the Truman Show reference, keeping it easy for the people to understand. Now, if that changes for whatever reason, and that model, all of a sudden becomes blown out of the water by something we discover later, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But it does.
Well, how far away is the sun from the Earth then?
A couple thousand miles, maybe. It really depends. We're still trying to figure that one out. The sun and the moon dynamics are very fascinating and very debatable in this model, because there's so many different aspects to it. Like, for example, is the moon actually reflecting the sun's light at all? The tests that have been done showing look those up online if you ever get the chance. The moonlight isn't just colder at night. It's that the moon is actually cooling things like a refrigerant. And if you take a magnifying glass to moonlight, it actually gets colder, which is bizarre. And that if you're in the shade of moonlight, it is actually warmer in the shade. If that's the case, then plus of course, if the moon and the sun are inside the system. The moon, a blood moon couldn't be possible unless the moon's luminous properties were artificial.
Well, I'm still trying to sort this out. So you're
Sure.
saying none of the deep space probes, Voyager, Viking,
Pioneer,
Horizon,
Gemini, Mercury,
Pioneer,
Apollo, none of them.
Well, no, I'm thinking of the distant ones. The thing that just went past Pluto. You're saying that's baloney, or
I am saying that every aspect of NASA, every single aspect of NASA, and I am sorry, that I'm the guy that has to hit you with this, because I hate to be the bearer, telling good people bad news, but I'm saying that NASA, the only reason that NASA even exists was to protect this place, and that everything, because they did not want.
You don't think it had anything to do with Sputnik?
No. I think the Russians were there since day one, because if you look at how the rocket program started in 1957 with the Americans, the Russians starting off right off the bat, and you say, oh, it's the Cold War, the space race. They were the acceleration that they were going off on that, and then when they first, let's put it this way, in 1958 when they first started 1957 they started the rocket program. 1958 they put atomic weapons, both of them, and started firing.
No, wait a minute. Sputnik went up in 57.
Yes.
Okay. And
Okay.
what's that got to do with nuclear weapons?
Oh, because that's where the strangeness starts. After that, in 1958, they, for whatever reason, decide they're going to put atomic weapons on top of their rockets. And for 4 years, the United States and the Soviet Union just start firing rockets straight up. big payloads, megaton weapons. And they fired for 4 years, and they both stopped at the same time in 1962. What were they firing at? What were they shooting at? For 4 years, it doesn't even make sense. And then they decide to stop at the same time. For me, they were painting the sky. They were trying to map this place out. They figured out after the first couple shots the Americans took in 1958 were megaton weapons, 2 and 3 megatons.
Now, wait. What basis do you have for saying that?
What, that they were shooting megatons straight up?
Yes.
High altitude nuclear explosions. You can look it up. It's on Wiki.
Operation Fishbowl, I think, is what it was called.
There were several packages, but Operation Fishbowl is one of them. But they're laid out there. It's not classified information in any stretch or form. In fact, none of the stuff that we've been researching from the Flat Earth side is classified in any way, shape, or form. It's all out there. And, granted,
that doesn't make it true if it isn't classified.
That is okay. Good point. But why would you say that you're shooting weapons up for 4 years and list all the?
Well, shooting rockets to develop their range, for example. Our first rockets certainly couldn't carry a nuclear weapon. Sputnik was pretty small potatoes.
Okay, but. So you're not a big believer in the atomic programs for either side, as far as the Russians and the Americans?
I'm certainly a believer that they were both going for more bang for the rocket, for the warhead. No question about that.
All right.
But it takes quite a while to get from Sputnik or what was.
To atomic weapons.
I'm trying to think of what our first. Our attempt at Sputnik first time around blew up on the pad.
Right. I don't remember the name of that one.
It wasn't a very good rocket.
No, we didn't have a. Okay, all right. Well, let's take the high altitude nuclear testing out of it. NASA you were and you'll have to forgive me here. Were you the one that coined? You're old enough. Did you coin the NASA acronym "Never a Straight Answer"?
No, I didn't. I wish I had. But,
okay. Should have trademarked it.
I have claimed SETI, silly effort to investigate.
Nice. That's good.
SETI.
That's good. I like that.
And I'm not a big fan of NASA in the sense that I worked on a number of space projects.
Yeah.
And what I found is they totally lacked leadership.
Okay.
When I was working in the 60s, I certainly expected we'd have a colony on the moon by the end of the century.
There you go.
And that we would have gone to Mars by now, anyway.
Easily, yeah.
We didn't have the leadership. The worst meeting I ever sat in on in my life, and I had a lot of meetings in industry, as you know, that's the way things go.
Uh-huh.
I was asked if I wanted to go to a NASA meeting when I was visiting Aerojet General with my colleague on radiation shielding for nuclear rocket engines.
Uh-huh.
And I said, sure, I'd love to. And it turns out the purpose of the meeting was to decide, sponsored by NASA. It was the NASA People Space Nuclear Propulsion Office. What should we do with this nuclear rocket? We were testing them, ground testing, certainly not launching, and they would be for upper stages. But, we could put a colony on the moon, we could go Earth orbit, lunar orbit. They hadn't the faintest idea what they wanted to do with the thing. Well, in the real world, unless you know where you're going, you don't get there. I mean,
True.
Because there are other people who want to spend the money.
Yeah. Well, knowing, so you were intimately tied with them. Doesn't it seem a little strange to you that here we are, 40, pushing 50 years after the Apollo program, and we don't have a colony on the moon? And we don't.
It does seem strange indeed. And people ask me, so how come we didn't go past, Apollo 17? And I say, some alien told us to stay the hell off our planet, our moon. I mean, that's as good an explanation as I know. Or a lack. One of the things you find is that there's a lack of Rickovers, if you will. Admiral Rickover was responsible for the nuclear navy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and you don't want to go there, get off the train.
Yeah.
And he had to constantly battle the battleship boys, but he focused on the submarine.
Yeah.
And in 1960, for the first time. A submarine went around the world underwater. It must have been some trip. It took 60 days. That's a long time. But, they got there. And many people don't realize during World War II, a submarine, we worried a lot about the submarines, the U-boats, all that sort of thing. They could stay underwater for about a day because diesel engines need air.
Sure.
Minor problem, if you don't have air, you don't run the engine. So Rickover pushed it, and the submarine made a difference. And then we got aircraft carriers because he pushed that, and turned everything around because the aircraft carriers can operate for 18 years without refueling, which sounds absurd to some people. What do you mean? Don't you need to get a tanker to fill up the tanks? No, you don't. 18 years on nuclear power, which is pretty neat, frankly.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, NASA, what's bothered me about NASA is a lack of leadership.
Yeah.
They needed somebody like Rickover, and they didn't have it. Look, I worked on nuclear rocket engines. There were 3 different companies, Aerojet General, Westinghouse, and Los Alamos, not a company, but a national laboratory, working on slightly different nuclear rocket engines. And we each successfully tested one, and they weren't little toys.
Yeah.
I worked at Westinghouse. The power level was 1,100 megawatts. Now, Hoover Dam only produces 2,200, and it's a huge monster.
Yeah.
Our rocket engine was less than 8 feet across in diameter. And Aerojet did one 1,000 megawatts. Los Alamos did one 4,400 megawatts.
Yeah.
And the next year, the program was canceled.
Yeah.
Now, that makes no sense, but it makes sense only if you say, well, we weren't going to do anything with it. We weren't going to commit to setting up a colony on the moon, let's say, or going to Mars. This would be an upper stage, and you could double or triple your payload to Mars with nuclear versus chemical.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. Cancel the program. You have a success. Boy, that seems very strange, doesn't it?
Agreed. What if, and let me throw out something at you then. What if the disarray in NASA, because you're right, they absolutely lack leadership and their programs have been going nowhere for years. I mean, there's no shuttle program. Most people don't even know that. We canceled that a few years ago. What if the disarray was deliberate? What if once NASA was formed, they'd just been dragging their feet on every aspect of the program? Because I'll take it one step further. When you said, oh, well, some aliens are on the moon saying, don't come back or don't come anywhere near our planet. What if aliens came to us, or whoever built this place? What if they came to us a long time ago and said, don't ever try to leave, ever? Isn't it possible that the United States government or whoever the other space agencies were, everything went through NASA eventually, that when they were formed to militarize space so that the private sector kept out of it, so that they could control every aspect of higher altitude. So, which is why you don't, for example, have any pictures of the Earth from space from 1972 up until July of this year. Why you don't have any NASA movies of the Earth rotating on its axis. The closest one is Galileo from 1990, and they completely disregard that now. You call up the trademark office at NASA, and they say, no, we don't have any. We've got somebody calling there. Is it possible that the Orion program, currently in production now, it's supposed to go to Mars, they just keep delay after delay. The next launch is until 2018. Maybe they might, and then they're only going to go around the moon, and then maybe they might think about going, building the biggest rocket ever to go to Mars. Isn't it possible that all these delays have been because the world isn't what we think it is?
I somehow doubt that. I have no reason to think that's the case. In other words,
but you still don't trust NASA.
Well, I'm not impressed with NASA.
Well,
some people are aggressive. There was Rickover, and he was aggressive. He knew where he wanted to go, and he decided on the steps to get there, and then he convinced other people to take that path. Yeah. NASA hasn't put forward certainly a courageous effort to get us out there. They have. But I'm convinced that the Voyager was real, Viking was real, the Horizon or New Horizon, I guess it's called, but the Pluto thing.
Yeah.
I think these things went out there, and I'm having trouble seeing how they could do that if there was a dome out there.
Well, that's just it. If you could simulate the telemetry, you got to remember all the telemetry tapes from Apollo. They're gone. They lost them, and then they said, "Oh, we found the tapes, but we erased over them," like somebody erasing over your basketball game when it was on VHS.
Well, there's several things that are gone that bother the heck out of me. I'm not denying that, and also what I think you're implying. That's why I'm trying to get a handle on the size here. You're implying that we didn't go to the moon.
Yep.
And all those guys were lying. And frankly, the foreword to my book, Flying Saucers and Science, was written by Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and I still consider him the sixth man to walk on the moon. And I don't think he's a liar.
Yeah.
And I also, about the moon, I look at the nuclear-powered seismometers. It's an awkward phraseology, but the astronauts took seismometers with them, and to get them to operate, and we did get signals back from them indicating moonquakes. That sounds a little strange, but that's what they were. It was moonquakes, and there were many more than had been expected.
Yeah.
The astronauts had to insert the nuclear power supply, not a reactor, but a small radioisotope thermoelectric generator, had to insert it in the seismometer. The nuclear device was attached to the outside of the lunar lander. And we got data back from there. So how did that happen? We got rocks back that are considerably different from the rocks here. And, how did we do that? Now, the Russians landed there and sent some back very small amounts, grams compared to pounds kind of thing.
Sure.
So where'd all that stuff come from? Did we fake all those rocks, too? And we got all the data back from Voyager and Viking and
let me jump in.
Cassini.
Let me jump in for just a moment, because we gave some rocks to the British monarchy, and they just discovered that the rocks were fake.
Where did you hear that story?
It was released about a year ago. Let me see if I can find the source here.
You mean the one that was given to the
somebody stole them and sold the real ones?
No, it was. I think it was donated to a museum, if I'm not mistaken, and then the museum.
To Holland. Yes.
We did. There's no question. We sent supposed lunar rocks, I'll put it that way, to the heads of a lot of countries. We were very nice. We gave them a piece of the moon.
Sure.
We called it a piece of the moon. I haven't tested any of those rocks. I don't know if they're from the moon or not, but I've seen a lot of pictures of moon rocks, and I've seen analysis presented of what was different about them and stuff. I find that quite interesting.
It was actually August of 2009. Jonathan just said this. The Dutch National Museum said today that one of its most prized possessions, a rock supposedly brought back from the moon by the U.S. astronauts, is just a piece of petrified wood.
What?
Yes.
Petrified wood?
We passed off petrified wood for moon rocks.
I have, the pictures I was looking at today, just because I was curious, are there a lot of pictures around? And there are. Certainly didn't look like wood. I'm incredulous. I'm not saying there weren't fake stuff. People get taken all the time.
Sure.
But see, Stan, I think
the good stuff.
These are the problems that people run into when they start to question the globe. Is there's so many inconsistencies coming from all of these institutions. NASA, for instance, you mentioned Pluto earlier, and when you look at the picture of Pluto that was recently released, you actually see the silhouette of the Disney character Pluto on the surface of Pluto, as if they're laughing in our face.
I haven't seen that.
It is remarkable. It is.
I'm still stuck with dealing with astronauts, and I've met several astronauts.
Sure.
And, I'm not convinced that they're lying.
I'm not saying that they weren't good people. In my opinion, the Apollo astronauts were the only ones that were actually let in on the big secret, which was, they told him, okay, look, you're going to fake this. Unfortunately, they probably went through all the training. And I'm sure the movie The Right Stuff, I'm sure that was accurate. That was great. By the way, I've got to throw in, you got to wonder, and I know people think it's my weakest clue, but I think it's relevant, which is, why has there never been a full-blown Hollywood motion picture made about the moon missions? Ever.
Because it's duller than hell.
Oh, don't you
Come on,
dare.
A movie to be successful has to have a plot, has to have action, reaction, love, hate. What's going to have mystery? It's duller than heck.
So
it's
you've thought about this.
As a scientist, I'm excited by people walking around on the moon. But in terms of plot value, I'd rather read a good mystery story in terms of plot value.
You're old enough to remember The Right Stuff in 1983, right?
I didn't see it.
You never saw it? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, great movie, nominated for Academy Awards, made a lot of money, ran long, 3 hours and 12 minutes or something like that, 3 hours and 11 minutes. It's completely set up for a sequel. The movie ended with the first low orbit launch. Why wasn't there at least the sequel? Could have been, was a walk in the park, and nobody made it. You're saying that because they didn't make a Hollywood movie about the moon missions because it's a dull topic, the greatest achievement in mankind, and we're just not going to make a movie about it.
It is. Look, it's like people who run marathons. 26 miles is a long way to run, but if there weren't anybody else in the race, it's pretty dull. In other words, there's nothing going on. You're not competing with anything. There isn't any love interest. What makes a Hollywood movie?
Yeah, it's not bad. Except that you know full well. You've been in the entertainment industry here and there. If there's a nickel to be made in Hollywood, they'll make it. They've made sequels to horrible movies. You're telling me no producer is going to come out and say, you know what? Let's make a moon movie. Never crossed anybody's mind.
Somebody's going to say, what's going to happen in this movie? You got a bunch of guys jumping around on the moon? What's exciting about that?
Well, then we'll agree to disagree on this one, because I know, look, Hollywood's not going to turn down that sort of opportunity. They're not going to at least try. There's never even been a made-to-DVD movie. It's not like, bad decisions are made in Hollywood more than good decisions. You'd think that somebody would just come out and say, oh, let's make it, and then it flops and goes straight to DVD. There's never even been one of those.
It's got to cost you a lot of money for the special effects.
Oh, really?
I'm presuming Hollywood, if Hollywood were to make a movie, they're not going to really launch a craft. You're telling me that would be impossible. So, special effects.
Yeah, it'll cost a little bit, but come on. I mean, crappy special effects, that's been around for a while. I'm just, you make The Right Stuff in 93. I'm sorry, The Right Stuff in 83, Apollo 13 in 95, and that's it.
Apollo 13, there was a reason to make, after all. There was tension. What happened? Are they going to make it back? Holy cow. There's a challenge, and you meet the challenge, and there's some worries and concerns, suspense.
And then that's it. Nobody else can come up with another plot line. Come on, got to be a little suspicious about that. A little bit, maybe not.
Well, there are definitely a lot of anomalies with NASA. I personally don't believe very much that comes from them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Earth is flat, though. It's kind of
let me change the direction just a little bit. I'm just thinking back when I had what was to me a surprising experience. I was flying from Newark, New Jersey to Hong Kong, nonstop, 16 hours. And it's a long flight. And I suddenly realized from what they were saying, we were over the Soviet Union, the Great Circle route, in other words.
Okay.
If the Earth is flat, why would you go that direction? It makes no sense. And it concerned me only because, if we crash, I'll be in the Soviet Union. I'd had a security clearance and all this kind of stuff. This is kind of scary. It wasn't my intention to be. This was several years ago before things changed. But if you look at flight paths, they do seem to, the Great Circle route does seem to make things go a lot faster because there's a globe under us, not a flat plane.
I'm glad you brought up flight paths. I've done a little work on them, as a matter of fact. Two of my clues were dedicated to them. One was called the Long Haul, and the clue 9 was called the Magic Show. And that's how I even got started on the flat Earth, because when you get to the southern hemisphere, or as I like to count it, the outer ring, the flight paths don't make any sense at all. For example,
I went to Australia. That made sense to me.
Where did you fly from?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles to Australia. Do you remember the route by chance? I know it was probably a while ago.
We went all the way to New Zealand, and then from New Zealand over to Australia.
Did you know that when you get over any ocean in the southern hemisphere, and by that I mean the South Pacific, the South Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean, the GPS system drops off and you are absolutely not tracked? You could check this out today on any of the live tracking systems. Once you get about 150 miles offshore, anywhere in the southern hemisphere, your plane does not exist. And I find that a little odd, considering the DoD.
Why?
Because the DoD built it. There's 24 satellites supposedly circling this place. You're telling me they don't have coverage? It's called a global positioning system, not a partially global positioning system. The 3 biggest oceans in the world, and they're not covering anything? Your plane just disappears?
I don't drive there very often,
But... And the routes because when I was looking at flight routes in the southern hemisphere, they bounce off. There's almost 95% of the flights in the southern hemisphere. And by that, if you're going from anywhere in South America to anywhere in Australia or anywhere near those places, you can't get nonstop flights. There's like 5 nonstop flights in the entire southern hemisphere. But the ones you can get, let's forget about the nonstops. The connections bounce off unbelievable place. So why in the world, if you're going from, say, Rio down to Sydney, which should be just a straight shot across the South Pacific Ocean, why are you going up to the Middle East? Almost always, for some reason. Or why are you going through London? Why are you going through Houston or San Francisco? It doesn't make sense unless you lay it out on the azimuthal equidistant map, which is a projection you can look up on Wiki, and it turns it from this weird arc to a shallow dog leg, and sometimes even into a perfectly straight line. It does not make sense unless it's on a flat map.
A spherical globe is very different from a flat surface.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But a shortcut is a shortcut, and there should be lots of shortcuts.
Shortcuts without any airports around, in case you have a problem, are some difficulty, I would say.
Yeah, but if you're flying across the South Pacific Ocean, that's simple. You don't have anybody's airspace to cross over. It should be 8-9 hours, whatever it is. You just go. Why are you bouncing? Why are you connecting through 3 and 4 cities? Try to book a flight sometime from anywhere in South America to anywhere in Australia. Not only are the connections weird, but sometimes it takes minimum 38 hours, 40 hours. I saw some that took over 2 days to get to that destination. Nothing takes 2 days to fly to. Not from major
I'm going to India in a few weeks, and it's more than a day, I'll tell you that. Because I got layovers. Weird.
Well, there you go. The layovers.
Yeah, but I'm in the northern hemisphere, and so is India.
Part of it is anyway. Even in the northern hemisphere, there are routes that don't make sense. I had a guy on my show the other day who said that a guy that does 1 second. He's a international shipping expert for FedEx. And he said everything from California goes through Alaska. If you're going over to Asia, everything goes through Alaska. And he goes.
I just said I went over Siberia to get to Hong Kong.
And on a globe,
and that's a great circle route if you look at a globe.
Yeah, but on
a globe,
but on
not a flat map.
But on a flat map, it's even straighter. It's even more direct. That's just it. Even on the northern hemisphere, things make more sense on a flat map, and it shouldn't. The odds of that happening are astronomical, and it shouldn't happen, but it does.
Well, you said that, but I don't understand why you say it's astronomical.
That all these flights,
have you stood at a globe and look the point to point. The Great Circle route. You know what I mean when I say that. They make sense to me. Rather than a straight line on a flat surface.
You're gonna have to do the research on this one. I can't describe it over the radio, but there are videos that I made and a whole bunch of other people have made so far, which is again why this thing is making traction. Look, if I made a video that said the flights don't make sense in the southern hemisphere and in the northern hemisphere, and I put that on YouTube, do you think for a second that thing wouldn't just get blown out of the water by everybody if it was dead wrong? And I wasn't even the one that came up with the concept. I was the one who just refined it. It's in fact, I had to make a second video just to clarify the first one because people were saying I would have thought that the nonstop flights, the lack of nonstop flights in the southern hemisphere would have bothered people. But everyone kept saying to me, "Oh, Qantas flight 64, Qantas flight 64." And that's like, why? And then that's when I found out the GPS system was dropping off, which by the way also doesn't seem to bother you. That the Department of Defense GPS system, 24 satellites, has millions of square miles of dead air. You cannot be tracked in the southern hemisphere.
Well, would it cost? Where do they launch those satellites from?
Does it make any difference?
Sure.
I mean, if they're supposedly up there, the thing went live supposedly in like 95. And to your point, if it cost a lot of money, look, this is the DOD. They don't do anything small, especially from a military standpoint. If they would have had,
but how many flights are they controlling in the southern hemisphere? Our normal concerns for the DOD don't involve the southern hemisphere. We're not attacking Australia the last time I checked, or
we don't
Argentina.
We don't care about our citizens flying over international waters in the southern hemisphere. Come on.
Hey, the DOD cares about citizens? Come on.
The DOD cares about every bit of information it can get its hands on. And I've had some people say, well, there's no towers, that they're still using part of the old LORAN system. And that when they switched over, well, there was some legacy stuff left over. I'm going, well, fine. You tell me the DOD wouldn't put barges at the very least out in the water somewhere, or just have ships with repeating, or I don't know, modified AWACS, modified spy planes, anything to get coverage down there. You're not going to have dead spots in a military network. Sorry, you're not.
Well, I don't know the last time we bombed somebody in the southern hemisphere. Well, I do in World War II.
Guys, let me jump in for just a moment because we have several questions coming from the listeners. And the biggest question is, of course, the curvature. According to the globe theory, the Earth is curving, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stanton, but it should be 8 inches squared every mile.
No, it's 8 inches per mile squared. So
okay.
8 inches times every mile times itself.
Okay.
So 2 miles would be 2 times 2 in parentheses times 8.
So,
32.
Yeah, according to this theory, you shouldn't be able to see things that are 80 miles away, 100 miles away, because they would be below the horizon. Not weather balloons, hot air balloons would fly in, and you would see them at a curve because they're following the curvature of the Earth.
Yes.
But this never happens. And this is one of the main things that proponents of the flat Earth bring up.
Well, wait a minute. You're saying that when, let's say, a balloon is good because it goes up high and it isn't moving very fast. You're saying it doesn't come into view as it would if it was coming up over the curvature. You know what I mean by that?
Yes. Yeah. We never see a diagonal.
Or let me make it a little different one. A plane, for example. So forget about the side to side, because curve could be measured either side to side or forward and back if you're looking for it. When you see a jet airplane fly off into the distance, if it is on a curve, eventually that airplane's going to go over the curve, and it's going to look. If you have enough magnification of the distance, you're going to look, and it's going to look like it's diving into the ground. Eventually, not to mention you shouldn't be able to see high objects like buildings at a certain ratio, like the Chicago skyline. Chicago skyline from the other side of Lake Michigan is 50 miles, which is, pushing 1,700 feet of curve. You can see the entire skyline. It's not a mirage. It's lit. It's not wavering. You can see it clear as day. And you can see this not just with Chicago, but with Toronto and cities all over the world.
Well, what you're reminding me is that when Marconi set out to send long-distance radio signals, and I mention it because I've been at the place in Newfoundland where the first transatlantic signal was received in 1901. Seems forever ago, doesn't it? Everybody said, "Hey, you idiot, don't you know that radio waves move in straight lines? And so you're going to run into the Earth, this round Earth that we've just been talking about not existing." And Marconi was smart. He sent signals from England, and he measured them in ships that were farther and farther away, and he found out that he did get a signal. And it was more than 20 years later when they finally found that there was a layer of the stratosphere, or the ionosphere, actually, that was reflecting those waves. They didn't know it when it happened. Marconi didn't say, "Oh, I know that there's an ionosphere there that's doing the work for me, and I'm glad." Not at all. But then we finally found the ionosphere, and that explains it. So what I'm saying is there's an atmospheric effect, if you will, stratospheric, call it what you want.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. That explains something that at first seems ridiculous.
Yep.
That would have made a good case for the flat Earth, because after all,
and
radio,
I would counter with, and I totally hear with you. I've heard that explanation, and you know, it's not bad. But I would counter with a guy that came out on this network, I think, not even 3 months ago, United States Navy missile instructor, who, you know, went on record, full-blown credentials, name, you know, video of where he was and how he trained people, been in 10 years, came out and said, "Look, we're painting targets with a beam radar, 2-inch beam radar at 60 miles. Targets, and we're hitting them because, you know, you have to reflect off the target, and the missile has to follow the signal in." He goes, "We're not painting mirages. We're hitting this thing. That beam is not bending. We're not shooting it up in the air. We're not bouncing it off anything. That thing is as straight as it can be." And, you know, he goes, "Unless somebody can tell me the gravity is actually pulling the beam down exactly."
Wait. But you're saying a radar beam, right? Okay, this is basically a radio signal at a different frequency than.
Yes, but it's a tight one.
Now,
It might as well be a laser. I know it's not the same thing, but it might as well be.
But isn't that same ionosphere there?
Not at that.
I mean,
not at 100 feet off the water. He's not bouncing it. What he was very clear, because he's heard people come back with him on this, and he said, "Look," he goes, "this beam is straight on." He goes, "You are painting the target, no different than if you were painting the target with a laser for a laser guided bomb. At 60 miles, that ship should not be paintable, not accurately." And he goes, "It's perfect every time." And he goes, and that's just the unclassified. That he was only willing to say it was at 60 miles. He says it's probably further. So,
well, I'm curious as can be about that, but you know,
maybe
he's trying to convince the Russians we had something special that we don't have.
You know, I would have thought that too, but there were too many other people that came out. They had a United States Navy submarine chief go into the same thing with them, saying, "Look, there's no Coriolis effect in the firing solution. There's no curvature when we plot our courses." 2 different artillery guys from the United States Army, one in Afghanistan, one in Fallujah, firing howitzers at 30 miles. One was a radar operator, same thing. He goes, "We're shooting point to point. We are not bouncing it off anything." And a sniper instructor from the United States Marine Corps was in 3 years and says, "Look," he goes, "I don't know why the mainstream media keeps talking about Coriolis effect when we're shooting bullets." He goes, "It's not even in the manual." So there's a lot of stuff on the flat side, again, which is why the traction has been so amazing. There's too many unanswered questions that, with all these people that are coming forward, and nobody's coming out from the other side to put their name again. You're the closest person, by the way. You're with any credentials.
I got dragged into the.
Well, that's why I'm not trying to be mean in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that nobody else is like, nobody from the military is coming out to counteract these guys, or the career surveyor that said, "Look, he shoots large tracts of land, car plants and airport runways, shopping malls, things." He goes, "Look, eventually we have to deal with the curve." He goes, "I went my entire career, 32 years, never saw it." Corporate travel agent saying all these people would complain in the Southern Hemisphere about all these flights they'd have to take and all these connections. And he goes, they don't make any sense. And she never even thought twice about it. And the flight instructor. I'm still waiting for a guy from the United States Air Force. Flight instructor owns his own school out of Iowa. He goes, look, all the instruments we use treat the world like it's flat. Not just sort of flat, perfectly flat all the time. And which is why, you know, having you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go back to something you said about 8 inches per
8 inches per mile squared. So if you believe, and this is not our math, this is ball earth math, and that is you take 8 inches times every mile times itself. So the first mile would be 8 times 1 times 1, and 1 times 1 is in parentheses. Second mile is 8 times 2 times 2, which is 4 times 8 is 32. 3 is 3 times 3 is 9 times 8 is 72 inches. And it just gets, you know, steeper and steeper because, you know, eventually if you're on a ball, you'll go vertical and you'll fall off the edge. So it gets more and more exaggerated as you get miles and miles out. And so, yeah, like I was mentioning, at 50 miles.
Where does gravity fit in there?
Gravity doesn't fit into the 8 inches per mile squared. It's just measurement. It doesn't apply. Unless you're talking about the ballistic side of things, in which case
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, the Coriolis effect, a perfect example. You know, people are saying, oh, you got to take the Coriolis effect when it comes into trajectory. You know, when you're shooting a ballistic object, you know, like a howitzer, like a missile, like a bullet. Well, you know, a bullet, it's got to be at least past a mile or something. You know, or they say it doesn't really matter. Well,
how come we aren't when we fire ICBMs, let's say?
Yes.
We expect we expect to hit a target.
Yes.
I'm not saying we always do, but
and mainstream will say that we have to plot in the Coriolis effect into the firing solution. But nobody I have talked to, nobody that has come forward, they all say the opposite. They say Coriolis effect. What, are you kidding? You know how hard that would be to factor that crap in? In fact, that was
my thought when you said it. I was going to say, how the heck would you do that?
Yeah, it would be really tough, especially think about artillery. You know, like even a tank. You'd have to figure out if you're firing, let's say, just 20 miles. It's like, well, okay, what direction are we facing? Are we north? Are we northeast? Are we northwest? How many miles are we shooting? You have to plot that in, and you say, well, we got computers to do that. It's like, not in World War II, you didn't. What were you using then? You know, same thing with the gyros on planes. People are saying, oh, you know, the gyros, you know, we use computer adjustments and laser levels and all this stuff to account for the gyros for the flat plane of how aircraft fly. And then someone emailed me and they said, yeah, really? What were they using during World War II? You know, because if a plane, for example, I'll throw one out at you. If a plane is flying and uses its gyro, the gyro will always try to keep the plane perfectly level. The problem is that if the Earth curves 8 inches per mile squared, the plane will have to nose down, either manually or automatically, every so often to go with the curve. Now, some people will say, well, gravity's pulling it down. I go, okay, fine. Then the plane will automatically have to try to pull up. It's not going to be perfectly balanced where it's not being pulled up or pulled down. And yet we never ever see that, which is why the flight instructor came out on record, not anonymously, and said, oh, yeah, by the way, all the instruments say that we're flying on a perfectly flat plane. And I go, then how do all the pilots miss it? You know, every pilot that's ever out there. And he goes, honestly, we're so busy with everything else. That's the last thing you'd want to think of. It's so far out of the realm of our minds that a commercial airline pilot could go his entire career and never figure this out. Because why would you? It's such a massive leap of faith, which I was hoping, you know, because you seem like a fairly open-minded guy, you know, with the whole UFO thing, that this actually would reinforce your model. You know, wouldn't it be? Let me throw it back at you then. Wouldn't an enclosed system be easier when it comes to explaining spaceships and all those things that are flying up there that I watch with night vision for the last 5-6 years? Wouldn't it be?
What's going on with night vision, boy? Oh boy, I've been shocked standing out there at night.
So you know what I'm talking about. You've seen it yourself.
I've stood with infrared goggles, night vision goggles, whatever you want to call them, with a number of other people on a dark night out in the country, and looked up at the sky, and boy, there's a lot going on out there.
exactly what I said. In fact, when I had first gone out, I was tipped off by a British guy who had mentioned at the very end of one interview, and I don't know, it was like a UFO alien type thing. And at the very end, he goes, "You want to do some interesting stuff?" He goes, "Get some night vision, go outside and start looking around." And I go, "You know what? I'll take that dare. Sure, why not?" So I went out and picked up some night vision off of Amazon. Amazing, they're all still made in Russia. I don't know why they've cornered the market on that stuff. But I go out there the first night and I look and I was going, the first night I was going, wow, there's just a ton of satellites out there, which you cannot see with the naked eye. And then I saw some of them start moving in ways that satellites, if you believe it.
I was going to say, they sure weren't all moving like satellites.
No, they weren't moving like satellites. And so then I started going up. Then my eyes completely opened. And this was way before Flat Earth. And I was going, what am I looking at up there? What the heck is all that stuff that's flying around up there? And they stay at, you've seen them. They stay at a pretty high altitude, and they're always perfectly quiet, and they seem to be going from one place to another, and there's certain times of the day that they're bigger than others. But it made me, when I finally got back into this kind of put some of that stuff together, and that is, wait a minute, if we're in an enclosed system, maybe these things aren't traveling from light years away. Maybe they're, maybe some of them are right here. Maybe some of them are just outside or down the road from us. Because I have no doubt that they're real. I've seen them myself. I went out at all times in the night and sat there and couldn't believe it. And I wish I could record them. But my question to you is, doesn't this make that whole model, where they come from, doesn't it make it that much more simple? Doesn't it give them a lot more credibility? No.
Why not? I'm not calling these flying saucers. I'm saying I don't know what the heck is going on up there. But
at least you've seen them. Oh, wait a minute.
I have seen things moving in the sky up in the sky at night.
Yeah.
Through the good binoculars, night vision. I don't know what the right name for them is.
Yeah.
Probably depends on who makes them. Yeah. And I don't know what they are, but there's a lot going on. That surprised me. And I was sure they weren't all airplanes because there was no sound at all that I could associate with them.
And some people have said, come back, you've probably heard this. I mean, you, the greatest UFO researcher of all time, you've probably heard it's like, oh, well, they're all reversed engineered from, blah, blah, blah at Area 51 and all that. And I was going, but there's way too many sightings that go back long before the United States was even a country. And,
that's right.
And at
that's why I mentioned the Bible and flying saucers, because you can't blame any of that stuff on Area 51.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, my favorite was, and you can disagree, but my favorite one of all time was the 1561 Nuremberg event, where the bright April day and the two giant armadas show up and start duking it out over the city of Nuremberg, and then for a full hour, and everyone's out there, they're sketching it, the newspaper artists, and then after an hour, a giant single black ship shows up for no apparent reason, and the other two scatter, and that raised so many questions for me. I was like, who are they? What's the power structure here? What was it, a turf war, and the cops showed up? So. Anyway, I just, the
saucer thing is what I certainly am not convinced that they suddenly just occurred in Kenneth Arnold's sighting in 1947.
Yeah.
And, it makes sense if you stand back a little bit. And the interesting data today is the Kepler stuff, which seems to indicate that on the average, every star has a planet. Some have 9, some have none, but, averaged out, apparently so far. Now, we haven't surveyed a huge chunk of the sky, but if that's the case, then there are about 10,000 stars within 100 light years.
Sure.
Instead of SETI at one point was saying there might be 10,000 places in the whole galaxy where there is intelligent life, maybe.
Sure.
But they certainly weren't talking about 10,000 within 100 light years. So I think the area is heavily, in quotes, populated.
Sure.
And I think it would be perfectly natural for anybody out there to want to make sure they don't get a surprise attack from some idiots who are nasty,
Yeah.
I should say. And let's face it, we have not a good track record. We only killed 50 million people in World War II.
Yeah.
If you were an alien, would you want us out there? And we've exploded 2,000 nuclear warheads.
I am so glad you brought that up. I'm just going to take this from your words here. If you were an alien, would you want us out there? Would you want us?
Not at all.
Okay. No different than, say, a box full of scorpions, maybe? Would you try to?
Worse than scorpions because we got nuclear weapons. I mean.
Exactly. Would you? I mean, yeah, you've seen what we can do. We're a mess, But
it's an argument I make that the people say, "Why would they come here?" And to make sure we don't go there would be the first question. And we need some numbers here.
Yeah.
In a big bomb in World War II. We built B-29s to deliver these blockbusters, 10 tons of dynamite, the energy equivalent thereof.
Yeah.
10 tons. And they made pretty big holes in the ground, too, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, first nuclear weapon was like 17,000 tons of TNT, energy release. First fusion device, and B-29, this was 1944, nuclear first fission device, 1945. First H-bomb, hydrogen bomb, fusion device, 1952, 10 million tons of TNT.
Yeah.
And the Russians set off big bomb, very big bomb.
The 50,
Yeah, 50.
Yeah.
50 million tons of TNT, energy release equivalent.
Yeah.
Megatons, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
In one lousy bomb, and I do mean lousy. And we've exploded 2,000 nuclear weapons on this planet, which surprises a lot of people because they don't realize. And we've left messes behind. I mean, you can determine we've been testing A-bombs just by doing good isotope analysis all over the place.
Sure.
So if I were an alien, I'd say don't let those idiots out. Wouldn't you? I mean,
absolutely. But wouldn't let's not stop there. What if they knew full well our potential, and what if they sealed us in a long time ago? Is what I'm saying. Is that look? If they knew our
remember, we didn't even know there were neutrons until 1932.
Yeah, but I mean, we
didn't know about fusion and fission until 1938.
True.
But surely somebody out there. I mean, our planet's only call it 4.5 billion years old. That doesn't matter what the exact number is. There's plenty of time for some of you who have been started a little bit before we did, because we know there are stars out there billions of years older than the sun. Mm-hmm. So, nobody in right mind would think we're the most advanced critters in the whole galaxy, would they?
No.
Well, maybe somebody does.
Let me take another tack here. What if? Do you believe that older civilizations were as advanced as us, or even more advanced at some point, that some may have even mastered the unified field engine?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay.
Because I don't see that we're any inherently more intelligent than, say, the Greeks were.
There you go.
If you read Greek literature, it is not children's stories. They were capable of some pretty advanced thinking.
Yeah.
Would considering now there are some people who will tell you that the Earth is only 4,000 BC is when the world was created.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that. I think 4 billion BC might be a little better.
I'm kind of in the middle, and that is, I think that the carbon dating system has huge gaps in it, meaning that I'm
not thinking about carbon for dating the long time periods. Nuclear stuff, much longer half-lives than that.
Okay, all right. But is it possible that between cataclysms and the older civilizations that have been around, isn't it possible that in my opinion, we are not the first people to rent this apart by any stretch of the imagination. Is it possible that other civilizations before us have survived and maybe are still here with us?
Well, you mean visiting from someplace else, or you mean beneath the
Or
ground?
maybe underground. Isn't it possible?
Well,
Or let
except
me.
why would you need motherships for, if they come from under the ground?
Why would you need motherships? Why do we have jumbo aircraft? But speaking of underground, let me throw out one for you because you may not have known this, or maybe you have. Do you know the deepest hole ever drilled on this planet so far? And by planet, I mean plane. If anyone wants to correct me out there, the deepest hole ever drilled was 8 miles, 12 kilometers. So my question I got to throw out at you, just for a scientist, is, but yet we still have mainstream science telling us exactly what all the bands are that describe our world. It goes from red to orange to yellow to bright white on the inside. If you believe the planet model, it's 4,000 miles to the center, roughly. It's a little under, but we've only gone 8 miles down. But they say, oh, we can determine with seismic radar and bouncing stuff off. But you don't.
Oh, we got a lot of areas of ignorance. I don't think we can determine that. We get surprises. There's a surprising story by a guy named Grinspoon, who was working in planetary sciences, and he was there when they looked at the first sites of one of the satellites of Jupiter, I guess. And he admitted in the book that everybody in the room was surprised. They thought they knew what they would see, and they didn't get it right at all. So I believe there's a lot of ignorance around.
Well, I mean, there's assumptions made where, I'll be fair, they're the first ones to say, especially in the wiki entry, we're extrapolating from this and we're basing it kind of off this stuff that's at the surface, but they're not going to come out and say no, we don't have a clue, and they're not going to draw a big map of the Earth, a big circle, globe, and with a cross section with a big question mark in it, because people don't like question marks. So. Everybody,
look, I got a whole book out there. I co-authored a book called "Science Was Wrong."
Okay.
With Kathleen Martin, Betty Hill's niece, and we had 14 chapters. We each did 7, and each one was stimulated by some smart guy saying something stupid.
Got it.
A man will never. The biggest astronomer in the United States say, "Man, this is." In 1903, October, and the date's important, 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight, he said that if there was one thing he was sure of, men would never fly any distance in a vehicle.
Would you mind?
Just like the British Astronomer Royal in 1956 said, space travel is utter bilge.
Okay. Would you mind me reading? You probably know the quote, but I don't know if the listeners do, that Wernher von Braun quote before the Apollo program was fired up, where
no, go ahead.
He said, "It is commonly believed that man will fly directly from the Earth to the Moon, but to do this, we would require a vehicle of such gigantic proportions that it would prove an economic impossibility. It would have to develop sufficient speed to penetrate the atmosphere and overcome the Earth's gravity, and, having traveled all the way to the Moon, it must still have enough fuel to land safely and make the return trip to Earth. Furthermore, in order to give the expedition a margin of safety, we would not use one ship alone, but a minimum of 3. Each rocket ship would be taller than New York's Empire State Building and weigh about 10 times the tonnage of the Queen Mary, or some 800,000 tons." This is
but remember, that says if you have a certain flight profile, we don't fly directly to the moon in the sense of a powered flight. When you say you're going to go someplace, you usually mean you turn the engine on and you turn it off when you get there. But that's not how we do. Wernher von Braun was one of the leaders in figuring out, hey, how can I get around that? There was a paper published in 1941. Dr. Campbell, a Canadian astronomer, as a matter of fact. He said science fiction writers were writing about going to the moon. And he said, this is ridiculous, and I'll show it. And he published a paper, Flight to the Moon, in a scientific journal,
Sure.
in which he calculated that it would have to weigh 1 million tons. Now, how did he get such a big number? Well, he made all the wrong assumptions. He assumed a limit of 1 g acceleration. He assumed a single-stage vehicle. He assumed a retro rocket in order to, get it back from the moon. And if you make enough wrong assumptions, you can prove anything is impossible.
Sure, but I mean, even you got to admit. I mean, he comes out and says, "Yeah, never. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen." And then all of a sudden, "Oh yeah, okay, we can do it." It's like, really, even Scotty doesn't say stuff like that. He'll at least play it out. It's like, okay, maybe.
Where did he say that, incidentally?
Writing in Conquest of the Moon, and I will have to look up exactly where the first publication was because I just cut and pasted.
Well, how long ago is what I'm?
It was in the 50s.
60s?
50s. 50s, 1950s. Yes, and I know that was before, everything was getting up there. But even he had his doubts. And I got to throw more. Hey, by the way, have you ever seen, I got to throw this out here as a tidbit, a little shout out to my friend Jonathan, who I'm sure would love me mentioning it. And that is, have you ever seen Wernher von Braun's headstone?
No.
On it, very simple headstone. You would have thought that the father of rocket science, you thought he would be a big cement thing, him pointing towards the stars, looking off into the distance. You would have thought something like, no, simple headstone, Wernher von Braun, 1912 to 1977, and it says on it, Psalm 19:1. That's all it says. It doesn't say what the verse is, or you have to look it up. And the verse says, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Why in the world would the father of rocket science be talking about a structure that was described in Genesis? I'm sorry, initially first described in Genesis, but then in Psalms. Why would he talk about this? Why would that be his call out from the grave? Of all the verses.
Does the word firmament doesn't mean something solid? The sky is the firmament.
Well, it depends where you're looking at. I mean, Genesis says it's solid enough to separate the waters from the waters, and I don't want to go into chapter and verse too much. This isn't a religious broadcast. No. But it raised an eyebrow when I saw it, because I was going, why would he have a Bible verse on there? First of all, there's not a lot of scientists I know that are going to put Bible verses on their headstones. I mean, I know there's some sentiment there,
Well, usually they don't have a choice in the matter. Somebody else does it for them because they're gone.
Well, sure, but it's an interesting passage because the guy was, kind of a mystery in some ways. I think, and it comes back to what we're looking at here, and that is when you said, that you co-authored a book called, I'm sorry, it was called Science is Wrong, or Science Was Wrong.
Science Was Wrong. Yeah.
Science Was Wrong.
What we originally titled it, you'll like this, was It's Impossible, Isn't It?
Nice.
But the publisher changed it. What
if... Again, I know I'm not going to look. I know that you've been set in your beliefs for a long time, but man, I'm not going to try to convince you in a show because it's almost impossible. Anybody that goes through what everyone in the movements go through, it takes days, if not weeks, to try to get your head around it. No play on words there, but isn't it possible that if the United States and the Soviet Union back in the 50s figured out that the world that they were taught, maybe they had maps, again, I go to the Admiral Byrd. Do you know who Admiral Byrd is, by the way?
Yes, of course.
Okay. What if, because in 1950...
I watched an astonishing interview with him, and it was maybe it was in your movie. I don't know.
Yeah. The Longines Chronoscope interview.
Yes.
From a CBS affiliate. We were lucky to get it, where he comes on television and he says, look, Antarctica is made out of money. He goes, there's everything you could ever want there. Yeah. And then 2 years later, they're all leaving the ice like they're on fire. Like they could not get off fast enough. And then they seal the sucker down and it's locked down from all corporations for all time. So the question is, I'm throwing the possibility out at you because, you seem like a pretty open-minded guy. And that is, if they figured out that the maps they were using for hundreds of years were wrong, and they were wrong about all the science about the geography of the world itself was wrong, would they tell people? And furthermore, could they hide it if they compartmentalized it well enough? And that's where I kind of, that was my big turning point where I said, you know what? If I was them, I might actually try to do the same thing. Because I think, the population is not going to do well with this. Religion is certainly going to have a field day with us. So why not? And so my question to you is it feasible at all for, if they saw the true shape of the world, or a shape that certainly didn't fit what they've been passing off for all these years, do you think they'd have the capability of hiding it? Or the motivation?
I don't know. I trying to decide what people can or will or would want to cover up. You got all kinds of targets for that notion.
Yeah.
And the whys too, for that matter. But don't you think if we faked the moon landings, that the Russians would have made a noise?
No, because I think the Russians were there. They were on the ice with us down during Operation Deep Freeze in 1955 to 1956. And I think we brought them in on it because they were the biggest other player after World War II. England was still rebuilding and the rest of the world was kind of in chaos. And yeah, Russia was still burning. But I think they were, I don't think we could do it by ourselves. And I think we brought them in and we learned the space, the rocketry program together. And I think the Cold War was a complete sham and that we have been secret brothers since the beginning at the highest levels. I mean, yeah, we tell our troops, better dead than red and all that other fun stuff. But I think at the highest levels, Russia knows. And that's the reason why their space program really wasn't done with as much enthusiasm after a while, because it's like, the Americans got a handle on how they're passing off space and we don't want to get involved. And Great Britain, I think at the highest levels they knew, and they said, you know what, we don't want a piece of this at all. Because
I can understand England not wanting a piece of it. They didn't have enough money to use for it.
But
England
never
was in pretty bad shape.
The first guy they put in, he went up yesterday, 2015, end of 2015. That was the first Briton apparently to ever do anything in space. It's a long time.
Well, from a first look, I live in Canada. We were a colony of Britain for a long time, but. Yeah. The Brits have a long history of ego before performance.
Sure.
Remember Dunkirk?
Yeah.
The history of developments before the Second World War, an English guy invented a jet engine, but nobody would pay any attention to him. So who flew the first jet aircraft? The Germans did. And then that guy went to work at Wright-Patterson Air Force.
Yeah, go figure. Quick question for you. And if it's too personal, let me know. Are you religious in any capacity?
Well, I was. Let's put it that way.
Okay, but because
I grew up. My family was Orthodox Jewish, and I didn't eat non-kosher meat until I was 16, I guess.
Okay. Because.
But I'm not practicing anything at this point in time.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's okay, because you'll understand this, though. And that was because you were asking part of the reason why. Why would you try to cover up something like that? And I covered this in one of the clues where I said, look, the big five religions in the world, which is Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity, make up, 80% of the population.
Well, Jews are a very small percentage of that.
Well, but it's still considered a very significant group. And you can't take them out of the big five.
Jesus was Jewish. What the heck? We got to give the Jews credit for something.
Good enough. All these groups have been looking for thousands of years, been looking for some validity for their faith, something concrete, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant. The Spirit of Destiny. Take your pick. Everyone's looking for some magical, wonderful artifact. If we are living in a structure, in a physical structure with barriers, a barrier you can walk up to and maybe not see, but definitely touch or at least feel some part of it, would that not imply divine purpose? Intelligent design? And wouldn't you simultaneously be giving all these religions their holy grail at the same time? And for a power structure, especially in the 50s, suit and ties and IBM guys and all these major defense contractors, you're talking about rolling the dice on a very big table and you don't know how that's going to turn out. What would religion do if they figured out that science was wrong? Not necessarily hiding from it, because
Well,
now it's amplified. Because now not only were they wrong, but now it seems like they're hiding it as well. That would be
religion is certainly one of the reasons for a cover-up, if you will. Pat Robertson has said every intelligent person in the galaxy is on planet Earth, and it was created in 4004 BC. And so it'd be totally tossed out as, giving a false notion of where we fit, where we are, what's going on. Yes.
Exactly. And my point was that if that happened, science would take a beating for a while. They would actually just take a shellacking, because religion would go back and say, look, we knew this the whole time. And you guys, because it is in all the texts, in one way or another, even non-canon.
I'm worried, again, you're going back to firmament being a structure.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering where translations and so forth fit in here, because I don't consider the sky a structure in that sense.
It's not even just the structure. And the Christian community, and unfortunately I am lax in that department. I mean, I was raised born again Christian and Sunday school and Bible camp and the whole 9 yards. But they have latched onto this thing very enthusiastically because of a lot of other stuff. And I'm not going to quote a lot of chapter and verse. If you want, you can go to like testingtheglobe.com by Rob Skiba. He did a really nice job, which was a lot of passages. The earth is fixed over and over again. The earth is fixed, immovable. The story of Joshua, how he asked for God to keep the sun in the sky an extra day. The Tower of Babel, which makes no sense on a spinning globe in a solar system, but makes perfect sense if it's in an enclosed structure that's not moving at all. And just over and over again, these passages. So it's not just the structure. I mean, it starts out in Genesis with the structure, but it's just one aspect.
Remember, Newton wasn't born until long after Genesis was written. So
that is
Kepler,
true. That is true. And I'm not saying these guys, because people have asked me, they said, look, you're not smarter than Einstein or Hawking or any of these guys. I'm going, no, of course not. But what if
with Newton and Kepler? That's how we explain the periods of the planets and all that sort of stuff.
But okay, then what if their foundations were wrong? What if the old structures that we built the globe model on were flawed, and every scientist from then until present day have been just unfortunately mistaken? And I feel bad for astrophysicists that have just finished their thesis, because there's nothing I can do for them. There's no way I can convince them. If this thing comes out, and by that I mean when. They're just going to, crawl into a corner in a fetal position, because they're not going to know what to do. I'm saying that the cover up at the highest level was easy, and the rest of the stuff, was hard, but the rest of the stuff came easy. The scientists, they're always going to do their work based on other people's work. So if people say, oh yeah, there's a solar system, here's the solar system dynamics, people are just going to keep basing, but the foundation is fragile. And if that
I think our knowledge of the solar system has enabled us to send devices, I'll call them satellites, but maybe that's as good as anything, to a number of other places.
Yes.
To the Cassini. I like the Cassini because it was really neat that we headed it toward Venus and then back to Earth and get a free kick each time, and then past Jupiter and get a free kick, and there it is, monkeying around near Saturn. That's kind of neat stuff.
Okay, let me. I'm going to try a different track.
Are you saying it's all phony?
I'm saying that the people that told you that there were satellites are also the same people that told you that we went to the moon, and that there's a space station up there called the ISS. And so I come back to you, and this will make more sense. And this is really for the people listening, and that is, if you had to go out and tell the average person on the street, time and money is no object here, how would you prove to them that they are on a globe?
I'd probably take them on a trip, and like those, I can't remember their names, the people who flew an airplane all the way around the planet. Remember that?
Just like a worldwide trip? That's how you do it?
Well, I'm saying that's nonstop around the globe. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you take a
I
jump.
can't remember their names, and I should, but I'm getting
But
old.
just because you move a race car around around a round dining room table doesn't mean that the dining room table is a sphere. It just means that you
I
drove.
didn't say it did, but they seemed to get where they were going, and
Good point.
you know,
Okay, but is there any other thing you
and the
would
sun
do?
set and rose. It's a funny way to put it, but
Sure.
they went through dark areas and then back to the light,
Yeah. Is
which
there
implies that there's something around there going around. Oh,
sure
terrible.
at least from a distance in a circular way. But as far as a sphere goes, a globe goes, is there
Well,
anything
how could
else?
you go around something if it's flat?
You
go
just
off
go.
in one direction and come back and around and go back to your original starting place.
How do you remove your finger around a dinner plate? You're going around in a big circle. You're not going around a sphere, though. And if the circle is big enough, how would you know? And then you say, well, GPS would tell us. I was going, you mean the same GPS that was created by the Department of Defense, United States military? Those
No,
guys?
I wouldn't have referred to the GPS. I
Well-
would refer to the guys who go around the planet nonstop, which is kind of a neat trick. And you don't think the space station, what is it, international?
The International Space Station. No, I do not. And I was a fan of the ISS. Gotta remember, man, I tried to debunk this. I tried to shoot this thing down for the better part of a year. And when I got to the ISS, and it wasn't me who made the video, look up ISS hoax on YouTube if you get a chance. It is fascinating. The interior footage of the ISS is from a production standpoint. Just from I watch a lot of media, I watch a lot of movies and television shows. And the interior shots are horrible. Because you're looking at it and everything should be fine. Remember, this is real life. So movie mistakes and movie bloopers, you shouldn't be able to find them in real life. You shouldn't be able to find them on the news. And we are finding them over and over again. There is no reason.
Well, are you saying there is no space station going around?
I'm saying there may
Earth?
be something flying up there, but there's no people in it. Not by a long shot. And that
So you've got all these people lying.
Well, yeah, but these guys are different from the Apollo people because these people, they're just Air Force employees. And you know this. I mean, you make them you give them a clipboard with a non-disclosure agreement. They sign whatever they want. You say, look, you're going to fake this. You don't get to ask why, but you're going to fake it. Then you're going to fly around in your khakis and your polo shirt and your socks, even though there's apparently no danger to worry about. And
But you're making it. You're spreading the circle of lies awfully large, and I have real trouble with that.
How large do you
I
need
know
it to
some
be?
of the astronauts, and you're saying that all of these guys have lied, not just some of them, all of them, right?
Anyone involved in NASA is a complete fraud, in my opinion, from top to bottom. Although there are a lot of people in NASA that don't know it. So the people that are on camera, yeah, there's only 500 of them that have ever been on camera that have supposedly been in space. The people that do the telemetry data, yeah, the software guys, they know. There's select others, but the people that turn wrenches, no, not by chance. My next door neighbor, I lived with for a year out in Boulder, Wayne Ottinger. He was one of the guys that built the LEM, the lunar module, the first one. The one that kind of blew up when I can't remember if it was Buzz or Neil when they were testing it with the ejector seat. He built that. His walls were bristling with plaques. He didn't know anything. He couldn't have been prouder to work for NASA. But because really, he's a garage mechanic. What's he gonna know? What do you tell him? You don't have to tell him anything. But yes, at the highest levels. Yes, NASA is a fraud. Anybody that has to do anything with the telemetry that has to do with Pioneer or Voyager or the Galileo series, any of that stuff is.
See, I have real trouble with that. Besides having met some of these people,
I'm not saying they're bad people.
I've worked on classified programs, and I can understand that. And there's some big ones,
Sure.
that were kept secret for, our first the Corona spy satellite. 30 years before we admitted it. And there were 12 failures at the beginning of it that were never publicly discussed.
I'm saying no. I look, if you're friends with some of these guys, great. I'm saying that I don't believe, and which is why I think Neil and a lot of the Apollo guys went into hiding. And by the way, I don't have a doubt in my mind of crap, can't remember the name, the guy that died on the pad, Gus Grissom. I have no doubt that he was made an example of, because they told him. I think these guys were absolutely legit. I think they were heroes. I think they were Boy Scouts, and I think when they went to him, they said, "Look, we know you've been training, but it's not going to happen, and here's why." And I think it weighed very high, very heavy on him. Look at the Apollo 11 international press conference. Those guys should have been higher than kites. They should have been beaming from ear to ear, just lucky to be back. And I've never seen such sullen faces. Neil looked like he wanted to crawl underneath the desk. Those guys, and I think the powers that be learned from that mistake. And that was, you know what, we're not going to tell any astronauts anything about why. We're just going to tell them, look, you're doing this for God and country. You're going to sign that agreement, and you're going to go from there. Do I think they wanted to lie? Do I think these people are awful, awful people? No. I think they're doing it for what they consider to be the greater good.
Well, okay. Let me go back to something I asked about. The seismometer on the moon and the moonquakes and stuff, and also the rocks that were brought back. Now, you're saying petrified wood. I'm not saying there aren't phony moon rocks around. It would shock me if there weren't phony
of course.
rocks, because how is somebody going to verify that what you just handed him wasn't a piece of junk,
Yeah, some money to be made there.
Big money, yeah.
Big money. In fact, Interorbital out in California, they're selling moon rocks in advance before they even send anything up there. They're selling, I don't know, I think it was like 7,000 a gram. And it was like, really? You guys have any? And you pay your money. You pay half your money up front with no refund in case something goes wrong. But I'll take you one further, and that is when it comes to the moon, I think I can simplify this, and that is if you get a chance, look up, because I can't watch the footage and not ignore. I can't ignore the footage that I've seen, and look up lunar waves on YouTube for anyone that wants to see it. And that is, there's some amazing footage of the moon, which appears to be a refresh issue, a resolution issue that's going through the moon, and it is not the camera. And it doesn't make any sense. So when I was looking at it, I knew exactly. I've been in tech long enough that I was looking, I was going, why is there a refresh issue with the moon? I was going, wait, why am I saying this? That's impossible. That means the moon, whatever we see on the surface of the moon, is a display. It is not the craters and everything. That's not really there. There's something underneath it that's actually displaying the moon. Whether it's 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, that's up for debate. But I know that nobody landed on it. So.
Well, you believe that nobody landed on it.
I have more conviction than most, and I have yet to.
Like I say, having talked to a couple of the guys that were on the moon, who was the second man on the moon?
Buzz?
I forgot how old I'm getting. Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a couple of
television
shows. We were on the same show. We met. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
It was Buzz that decked somebody who was thinking that he didn't go to
Bart Sibrel, but which was an interesting documentary when astronauts go wild, or astronauts gone wild in 2004, which was when he went to the astronauts. Again, interesting. I think he completely stumbled upon us. I don't really like him much as an interviewer, but hey, he does what he does. But he brought out a Bible and he said, put your hand on it, swear that you went to the moon. These guys wouldn't touch it. They treated it like it was on fire. Why? It didn't make any sense. I was going, and that bugged me for years, because I was going, wait a minute. Why would they even care? One, they're not in a courtroom. They're not under oath anyway. It's just a Bible. It's not like you can't lie. It's called perjury. People do it all the time. So why wouldn't they do it? And I think there was a bigger purpose involved. I think that they knew at that point, because the whole concept of where we are and the spirituality of it and the concept of God comes in. And that is, are you really going to swear? It's one thing, that was an analogy I've used before, and that is, it's one thing when you, to believe or not believe in Santa Claus, but it's another thing if you actually see him in the living room eating cookies. And that is, You really going to swear on the Bible against a God if you actually know what the world really looks like? Because if we are enclosed, then it's going to be real tough to be an atheist. Real tough. And at that point, you're accountable for everything. And
what I'm saying is, when people talk about conspiracies, you've got the biggest one possible going here, because it's not just the astronauts, but all the guys with all the signals coming back. You mentioned it before.
Yeah.
All
the telemetry guys
and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're saying that Voyager didn't go out there or didn't go anywhere, I guess you're saying, and the Pioneer spacecraft.
Nope.
And you got a whole bunch of these things and a whole bunch of people who have kept the faith. That's a funny way to put it. You're saying they kept the faith, all right?
Yeah, so to speak, yeah.
And I have real trouble with that.
What, because of the sheer number of people?
The sheer number of people and the amount of sophistication to get all this stuff to come out fitting the wrong picture, if you will.
Well,
which is what you're saying, that all the measurements and everything have all been faked.
That's just it. When I looked at this, believe me, no one was a bigger fan of NASA than I was growing up. I thought they were the greatest thing ever. I mean,
whether NASA's, I like I told you, I don't have much respect for NASA.
But what I'm saying is, they're as transparent as they are, there seems to be a lot of things missing. Should be stacks and stacks of evidence on the space side, which aren't there, which I kind of talked about in the beginning. The photos of Earth from space, 43 years, only one blue marble shot. No shot. Even now, and NASA says, oh yeah, we have no shot of the Earth rotating on its axis from space. And I do not count that Japanese geostationary satellite, which just sits there in one place, because the Earth isn't rotating. They're getting lazy. No exterior.
But if you got an 8,000 mile diameter sphere, supposing one had,
yeah,
and you're within 100 miles of the ground. It doesn't matter whether it's 300 miles of the ground.
Yeah,
you're awfully close, and you're not going to get a picture that shows it in space.
43 years. You're not talking about. We're talking about a sought-after image. I wasn't kidding when I said that in 2000. This tells you how bad it was. That was only 15 years ago. In 2000, when I looked up, because I wanted pictures for all the, I wanted different Earth pictures for all the monitors in my tech support department, and I typed in Google, Earth from space. The only picture that came up anywhere was the Apollo 17 shot, showing the bottom part of Africa and all of Antarctica. It took years for them to even come up with CGI images to replace, the guy from Apple that had to write, the first iPhone globe that's on the front. He had to draw that because there were no images for him to get.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is if you stick close to the planet, and maybe that's what you're saying, you won't be able to get those things.
We've got stereo behind, stereo ahead. You know full well we've got satellites that are way out there, if you believe the NASA story. You can't tell me that none of them just spin around for a second and take a picture of themselves. Not to mention, we don't have satellites taking pictures of their other, and we don't even have a good consensus of how many satellites are in space. The numbers literally range from 3,000 to 20,000. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea. You'd think that NASA would track everything in space, and apparently they track nothing. There's just so.
Why would they track anything besides their own? Now, the Department of Defense is another story.
Well, NASA still is, as much as people want to call them the guys that are in the white uniforms that don't carry guns, they're still a military wing of the U.S. government. They smile and they wave at the camera, but plus I'll throw one more out, and that is, and I'll give credit to Max Malone. I mean, I didn't find all this stuff out. This is a hive mind operation, where he goes, why is there no exterior shot of any astronaut from any distance on any mission where they even take the camera and moving camera, not still shots, moving camera and spin at least 180 degrees, not to mention a 360. It was never done on a space shuttle mission, Apollo, Soyuz, ISS. It's never been done. Why is that? Why is it never ever? It would have happened on accident with all the thousands and thousands of hours of footage. It's never happened. And it's because they can't do it, because they're faking it. It is all a big ruse.
You're saying absence of evidence is evidence for absence, which I don't find.
You want to call it circumstantial? You see footprints in the snow going up to a bank. You see broken glass, a few drops of blood, some bills, and some footprints going away. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. See what I did there? Rocket scientist to figure out what happened. In this case, it's lack of, which is why I want to keep circling back.
That's what I just said, absence of evidence. But that doesn't mean there's an evidence for absence, that there is no such thing. You haven't looked at all the pictures. Obviously, I haven't. But
all the pictures of what? There's no the pictures of Earth from space.
You're saying there are no pictures that would meet the criteria of showing...
Well, that's just it, though. That's where I thought that I was making the mistake in the beginning. I was thinking someone's going to come back and say, "Oh, no, here they are, right here." I even had a Jet Propulsion Laboratory call up during the show when I was doing Ground Zero. And Jet Propulsion Laboratory, why are they even listening to the show? And they call up and say, no, we got pictures. We'll send them over to the station. They didn't send anything. I'm talking about the blue marble shot. Earth in full sunlight, full Earth. One shot was taken in 1972, and then for whatever reason, July of this year...
Where was it taken from?
Apollo 17. They waited till the last supposed mission coming back, and they took one shot of it coming back from Apollo 17, 1972. You know this photo better than anybody.
Well, wait a minute. Are you saying that Apollo 17 did go to the moon?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that shot was fake, too. I'm saying that how they pass it off is that Apollo 17 supposedly took a shot. So Apollo 8 through 17, 10 missions, go to the moon, come back. Nobody takes any pictures of the Earth. On the last mission, where they know it was going to be the last mission, they come back and, but let's take a shot just for posterity's sake, right? Supposedly take a shot. That was the only photograph they even put forward. And then coincidentally, July of this year, they come out and NASA, what amazes me is they announced it. NASA puts it on their website. They say, "Oh, by the way, here's the second blue marble shot we've taken in 43 years. NASA they tweeted it. The White House retweets it. Obama, I've got a clip I'm going to put on my next show. Obama's talking about the blue marble shot. Nobody took notice of this. Basically, they confirmed everything that we were saying for the first 6 months, which is there's no pictures of the Earth from space. Oh, yeah, by the way, here's the second picture of the Earth from space. Really? 43 years? You didn't think of taking one?
Well, wait a minute. All the spy satellites are taking pictures of the Earth from space.
Not a full, spy satellites, okay. Spy satellites or spy planes. Because at this point, I'm questioning whether satellites are even there or if they're all being done by spy planes. If spy planes aren't taking the high altitude shots and they're just passing off them as they're just feeding that to the Google Earth database, and Google Earth, they're the ones that are running with it.
Yeah,
a lot of stuff.
What do we say about Google Earth? Where are those pictures taken from?
Google Earth? Oh, not very high up. You wouldn't need them to be very high up. You can
spot a house on a street, I guess. But
no. But I mean, even when you're going up, you don't. I mean, if let's say a spy plane, not the SR-71. We're assuming, even though the Air Force said that there's no other spy planes, that that the Aurora project doesn't exist. Let's say,
I don't believe that either.
Well, thank you for giving me that one. Yeah. By the way, the little side note, because I watched the decommissioning on television of the SR-71, and when they asked the general, they said, "Oh yeah, what are you going to replace it with?" He goes, "Oh, nothing." I was going, "What? Come on, you really gonna?" But anyway, so let's say a spy plane caps out at 20-25 miles. That's way up there. And you can take some decent shots from there and stitch them together, and there you got Google Earth. Everything. Here's the thing, which is why I asked the question to you earlier, which was everything seems to be funneling through one group, because when I asked this question, how would you tell the average person on the street? How would you show them that it's a globe? Eventually, they keep going back to one group, and that is NASA. Some sort of space organization. It's like, well, you can't show them unless you get up high enough to go into space. Like, really? You sure? There's other things you should be able to do. The curvature going forward, seen in the distance. Might be able to see that. But it's really, really tough. We've been so conditioned, since grade school. You put a globe in our classroom, we don't know any different by the time we get out of high school, let alone your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD. So if you're trying to convince people, how do you show them? Because they automatically think. I get these two reactions all the time. They say, "Oh, we know it's a globe. Duh, everybody knows it's a globe." And I go, "Well, how do you know it's a globe? We all know fire burns, water's wet. You drop a pen, you put a name to it that appears to be gravity, even though there's some question there. Then, but the globe is assumed like all these other things because you're just being told that it's a globe. What if it wasn't? What if
you're saying also that all the other planets, all the other planetary positions and so forth, that's all baloney too? I think you're saying.
Yes, I'm saying that if you went into a planetarium and took pictures in a really nice planetarium and took pictures and fed them to people, what would they know the difference? Why?
Well, I'll even grant you that.
I mean, it's how much people will believe, especially nowadays. I'll give you here's an example for you, and that is here's the I just thought of an absence of evidence thing for you, which was I show you a picture of me having dinner with Anne Hathaway, and I say, "Oh yeah, by the way, we've been dating for the last 10 years," and you come back and say, "Well, don't you have any more pictures than that?" I go, "No, but that's all you need, right? I mean, it's a picture," and it's like, "Yeah, but pictures can be faked." What's the difference between what we've been fed now and the Anne Hathaway story?
I think there's a hell of a lot more complex data when it goes to, Voyager, Viking, Pioneer.
Credibility, the subcontractors, General Dynamics, Lockheed, Boeing, Hughes Aircraft, all those guys,
So they're being paid to fake everything.
No. They're turning wrenches. They're building stuff. Absolutely, they're building stuff. Those things are going nowhere. They're being fired up into the air. The telemetry is being taken over by the ATS, Department Atmospheric and Transportation Safety Bureau. And which Interorbital told me about on a conference call because I asked them because I was suspicious. I said, "Look, you're going to send stuff up there." I go, "But you have to file your flight plan with somebody like NASA, right?" And they go, "No, we don't have to do it with NASA." And then they mentioned this bureau, which I'd never heard of, which apparently that's who you'd contact 9 months at least in advance. You give them all your telemetry data, everything about the rocket, everything you need to know. You send up the rocket, they took over the telemetry, rocket falls in the ocean, nobody knows any different. They probably pipe it through the old, now it's going to be somewhat enhanced Loran system, and who would know any different? And they've kept a lid on this. And by the way, to your point, NASA has not done this well over the years. It has not aged well. All the stuff they've been doing, and some of their production techniques have been terrible, which is why it's being discovered now. The internet hive mind, the detection ability of the internet is awesome. They miss nothing. They don't miss mistakes.
But the amount of crap about conspiracies and so forth, there's an awful lot of false information.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But this one's different because this isn't one that you can bury underground in the Nevada desert and never ever see again. This is something that we're actually living on. This was something that was never, in my opinion, my humble opinion, this was never something that was going to be hidden forever. They've had contingency plans for a while. And that is, because you can't hide something that people are living on. It's like trying to hide something from your roommate. You can shift it around every once in a while. Sooner or later, they're going to find it. And they kept this thing going for 60 years. And the thing that really caught them was the high-speed internet and camera technology. Once you could put a computer into a camera, you could find a lot more. And the internet, this not just social media, although that helps, but forms of social media. YouTube's really, really screwed them because people can compare notes anywhere. And that's what they've been finding. A guy in Nebraska at 3 a.m. can find this little thing. It's like, hey, this little thing on the ISS doesn't look right. Can everyone see this? Only takes one guy or girl. And that's where we are. We've been finding a lot of stuff. I mean, way too much stuff for it to be just conjecture and speculation. It's resonating too much, and it hasn't been shot down. The thing I like to say is it's like I was waiting for the silver bullet. Flat Earth is like a big old werewolf just running through the countryside. And people think they got the silver bullet to shoot it down, and they're not. It hasn't been shot down, and I'm trying to figure out why. It should have been shot down by now, and it's not. Nobody stepped forward. You would have thought that some physicist would have come forward and said, here's why it's absolutely 100% a globe, and here's my proof. And then people, if it would have resonated well enough, people would have said, you know what? Completely mistaken. Everybody was wrong. We all go home now. They put down their pitchforks and their torches, and they go home, but they haven't. And that's why
there's an awful lot of people in the scientific community who won't be bothered with anything that's unusual. Don't want to pay attention to UFOs because it's impossible, and governments can't keep secrets, and a whole bunch of other false claims. But
True.
It keeps people away.
True.
But the UFO bother me with that crap.
Well, no, and I've read emails from physicists who are going, look, I don't know what's going. Basically, they're really surprised more than anything, because the quote I had was, it's like, I don't know what's going on out there in the world, but I'm not gonna go anywhere near it. But part of them is because, and I've written to a couple of them, anonymously. They won't go on air, and they can't answer some of these questions. Some of the big ones, because they can throw out some math. Unfortunately, their only weapon in this is math. That's all they've got. It's like, oh, okay, here's this, everything that has to do with a sphere. Here's all the math and trigonometry.
Well, I think the rocks back from the moon are more than math. And I'm not saying there aren't phony ones. I agree with you there.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean there aren't real ones too.
Again, it's just a rock. I picked up a rock on my way back from my dinner with Anne Hathaway. And it was kind of crunchy looking. And I said, I showed it to a museum guy. I said, yeah, I got it from the moon. Just because it comes from a military organization, and I have to circle back. It's like, look, I understand that people don't like being lied to, and especially from their own government. And, but militaries do lie. Go back to the spy plane. Until the U-2 spy plane was shot down, we didn't have a spy plane. The SR-71 made it from conception to retirement. Nobody knew it was there. And then all of a sudden we come out and say, oh, by the way, we're retiring the SR-71 spy plane. It's like, what, you had a spy plane? And this, you know what I mean.
People did know. Yeah, look, there's no question there's a lot of, I'll call it fraud for want of a better word. It's a simple word to say deception, anything you want. I'm not saying that there hasn't been deception hither, thither, and yon. It's a way of life for some people. You're saying it's the only way of life for NASA and other organizations.
Yes.
But how about China and India going into space?
Oh, don't get me started on those guys. Because NASA was the first, every other space agency blueprinted and went through them. And yes, at the highest levels, from China, look up Chinese space bubbles. You get a chance on YouTube. Oh my, you thought our production levels were bad. They were downright sloppy. Let's put it this way. It's gotten so bad out there that NASA had to release a second wiki section called Third-Party Confirmation of Moon Landings, which basically, because they've been just being battered over the last 5-10 years, and which basically says, look, don't take our word for it. Listen to China and India. And, they say, okay, here's the picture that China took, or India. And, China supposedly has had a probe on the moon for the last, since 2013. Nobody knows about this. It's like a Mars rover, supposedly on the moon, running around. It's like, why is it not the Sea of Tranquility? Why is it not taking a picture of the United States flag, walking up to it, snapping it in half, then unfurling the big red Chinese banner? Why are they not doing this, or even talking about it? It's every space program has been blueprinted from NASA. NASA founded it. Russia was right there with them, and all the other space programs. We'll use it. We'll use the one from today.
Yeah, but Russia went into space first. They had the first satellite. They had the first man. They had the first woman. They had the first trip around the moon.
Yep.
And that's what led to NASA. All right.
Yep.
But
they got the head start. And I think at one point, unfortunately, we had Hollywood. We were better than they were when it came to faking stuff. Russia's good. I mean, there's no question. In fact, I've got to watch eventually watch the 1936 moon movie they did. I didn't even know existed, called Cosmic Journey. Apparently, it's very good. But They were up, yeah, they went up there, but once they realized that we could do it better, and by that I mean the U.S. for people that are out there and are not in the U.S. Once they realized the United States could do it better, they just folded like a card table. Hey, doesn't that seem strange to you? By the way, because I've never seen this in the history of sports, and that is big space race. We get to the moon. The United States gets to the moon. Russia just quits. Just gives up. It's like, that's it. They made it. That's it. Just pack it up. We're not going to do any more. That's it. That's done. That never happens. That's like a marathon race, and the first person crosses the line, the other person just doesn't go to the race.
Luna sent back some rocks.
Russia
sent back.
Why isn't Russia on the moon now? Why, what you said at the beginning of this thing, why don't we have a colony on the moon? We should have flying cars, which we can't, not if we're in an enclosed system. We should have Jetsons homes, and we should have a colony on the moon. I was a big fan of Space 1999, the television series. That thing seemed so logical and real. Why didn't it happen? And not only did it not happen, there's your absence right there. We never even tried again to do anything. And then once other countries came online, why doesn't China have a man on the moon? Why doesn't India? Why didn't a woman ever go to the moon to represent females? Why didn't that ever happen? None of this stuff happened. They've just been dragging their feet. The Orion program. I'm going to make a prediction right now.
Which Orion program do you mean?
The Mars mission. What they're doing now, getting ready for Mars. I know they're shooting up rockets and they're getting the capsule. I don't want to get into the Van Allen radiation belts right now, but the capsule that they're supposed to be going, Orion is supposed to go to Mars. Plain and simple. That mission is not going to happen, and it can't, because they realize they painted themselves into a corner. Their production techniques, if you're going to fake it, and I have not been shy about saying this in the past, if I was, say, working for the government and somebody handed me the folder and says, Mark, you're going to do the fake Mars program, I'd say, are you out of your mind? There's no way you can fake a program like that now. There's too many details, too many production techniques. You're going to get caught. Somebody's going to catch it, just like they did with the moon missions have been torn apart, just shredded. The ISS is ridiculous right now. And Mars, whoever's got that job right now, no wonder they're dragging their feet, because it's just a mess. It's just a freaking mess. But while I got you, and again, I don't know how much more time you have. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm surprised we haven't been cut off 10 minutes ago.
Well, the program's actually 3 hours, and obviously we cut the breaks because I didn't want to interrupt at all.
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, Mark.
So it's okay to keep me up past my bedtime.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I want to keep you, but I do want to, because you're a radiation guy, I want to run this past you, because this part's been bugging me, and people who know me, they know what I'm going to talk about here, and that is the Van Allen problem. And that was, if the Van Allen radiation belts, announced in 1959, were so horrible, deadly, and then Van Allen, kind of pulls back from that and says, no, if we go real fast through them, that was his answer. Let's just floor it. Let's just hit the gas and go through it. There won't be any problem with it.
Well, I was looking at radiation problems in space way back, in the early 60s, I guess.
Okay.
And people forget, there's a problem in the larger sense here of people using the term radiation to cover an awful lot of ground. There are charged particles that can't penetrate through anything. A piece of cardboard
Sure.
will shield you against those. Gamma rays, no way, Jose. Well, what the particulate radiation that's in, or the radiation that's in the Van Allen belts, if you're not there terribly long, and if you're now you can't walk around without any clothes on. That would be difficult anyway. But then you'd get a lot of surface dose, because there are plenty of particles that don't penetrate any distance. But if you're inside a craft in a uniform, and you may have noticed that they're not gossamer thin, the space uniforms, to say the least, and they're inside, let's say, aluminum can, for want of a better phrase, the radiation levels just aren't that high. And unless you spend all your time, doing floating around outside the spacecraft and in the belt instead of going through the belt.
Got it.
The radiation levels are not that high.
And I'd take that, for what it's worth. But there's a problem. And the problem is that NASA, October of last year, made a thing for television, and it's on their website right now. It's called Orion Trial by Fire. It's part of their Orion program, where they go into great detail about the Van Allen belts and saying how it's a big challenge, and they've still got to figure. And the first thing they're going to fire up there is going to be unmanned because they haven't figured out how to solve the radiation issue from the Van Allen belt. I do not know.
My God.
I do not know who decided to write that and put it on television. I do not know why it's still on their website. And I'm going to put, that in a clip. Anybody can watch it. It's on YouTube all over the place. It raises so many questions that it's like, okay, one, did they forget about how they supposedly solved the radiation issues from Apollo 8 to Apollo 17, the 10 missions? If they did forget, then why are they even trying it again? There's too many things. It's like they want to get caught. This one was so dumbfounding.
We need more money to figure this out. That's usually the excuse.
Well, yeah, but it's not like it's like everybody I showed this to said the same thing. It's like, wait, solve what? You already solved it 10 times, round trip. Nobody died.
I was going to say 2 times each trip.
Yeah. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody died. The capsules weren't contaminated. So what exactly happened? And they still.
Well, you need neutrons to contaminate the capsules, and where are the neutrons coming from? The Van Allen belts don't have neutrons.
Again, if the Van Allen belts aren't a threat, then why is NASA on their website? And again, this was made for television. They even, brought out Kelly Smith, their best and brightest. He was out there drawing on a clear board, going into detail. You could not mistake it. What they were talking about. They even made the radiation sounds and looked like, the whole capsule was going to glow, and they were saying it's going to damage electronics and the guidance systems. And they wouldn't send people through it because it was too dangerous. So the question is, if it's too dangerous now, then what happened back in the 60s? And
somebody cranked up the engine, the Van Allen belt engine, of course.
Yeah. So it leads into the stuff that we're looking at. If there's too many, again, that's just one of the questions we ask. And that is, okay, are the Van Allen belts real or are they not real? Because if they're not real, then at that point you have to, then the whole entire space program, everybody's space program comes into question. So
the Van Allen belts are real. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
I'm also convinced that if you use good sense, you don't walk outside when it's pouring rain and not expect to get wet.
Sure.
So I'd love to see that quote and see what.
I'll have Chris send you the link. If people want to look it up, it's on nasa.gov/press 2014 October. NASA premieres trial by fire video on Orion flight test. It's real easy to find. In fact, if you're just in Google, just type in Orion NASA trial by fire. You'll find it's still up there. I'm floored that it's still up there, because it goes against everything that they talked about in the 60s. They have no answer.
Well, we talked about incompetence for NASA, so there we go.
Really?
Guys,
anyway.
let me jump in.
I don't know where that one came from. I'm shocked by that, but I shouldn't be. As I said, that meeting that I attended gave me a not very good view of NASA leadership and paying attention to doing things right. It was a sad day.
Let me jump in for just a moment. We have a listener that's called in from the chat room who's got a couple of questions, and he's been holding for about 45 minutes. So, let's go to him because he really wants to get his questions. I think we have Zach on with us. Are you there?
Yeah. Hey, how you guys doing? This is Zach from Portland, a.k.a. the proprietor. Just got a few questions for you. Originally, I had some different questions, but I figured I'd keep it kind of light. My first question is for Dr. Friedman.
Mister, no free doctorates, please. What?
No, Mister. Okay, sorry about that.
No doctor.
So do you
No
think
doctor.
I'm not
no
a doctor.
Okay, gotcha. So do you think water can bend?
Well, if it's in the form of ice, yes.
Oh, clever.
If it's in the form of if it's a liquid form, do you think water can bend?
I don't know what that means when you say water bending.
Do you want me to?
Well, if we live on a ball, and with all these oceans, that means water must be able to bend around a spinning ball. And I've spent about the last 5 months
it's all
trying to find
attracted
examples of this.
Sorry,
if it's attracted by gravity, that's putting it rather crudely, but what holds the water to the planet is gravity. So it's not bending. The flow is not in a straight line. You can see that in a river.
I understand that.
The water bends in that sense.
Well, how does gravity know? I mean, all the oceans are basically connected. So they weigh trillions and trillions of pounds. How does gravity decide how much to pull on, how much gravity to use to pull down towards the center of all these oceans versus just me or an apple falling from a tree? How does it distinguish that? How is that possible?
Well, the force of gravity is proportional to the mass of the attracting bodies. So if there's a big mass, it pulls harder. Gee, that's an awkward way of putting that. I wouldn't teach a class like that. But in other words, we do have a ball here. Well, I guess that's the whole discussion, isn't it? We don't have a ball here. It's a flat plane. It's a flat Earth. But we do have, assume for a moment, a spherical body, roughly, a flattened sphere, call it close to a sphere, good enough. The water is there. It is attracted by gravity. It's there not because it wants to be there. And so water, the mass of the water, it's maybe bent's a good word, maybe not. But it's one of those questions that I don't see where it fits into the picture here. What if it's flat?
Well,
what holds it to the flat, to this flat surface?
Do you believe? Well, what do you mean it's flat? When you pour water into a bowl, or say you pour water onto the concrete, it spreads out until it finds its flat, level ground. Just like when you're trying to find your floor and you're doing construction, you use a level. Today's levels still use water in them because that is the most accurate form to find a level surface. I have a hard time. I've spent 5 to 6 months trying to research how I can get water to bend around a spinning ball. And I have yet to find anyone who's done to prove this is true. I definitely agree it's a theory, but I just can't find anything.
Can I chime in for a second? Can I chime in for a second?
Sure.
I believe that if space was real, that a sphere might be able to hold water uniformly around it. However, that would be if the sphere wasn't spinning. Because if the sphere is spinning, then the centrifugal force should have some play on the liquid in question. So at that point, wouldn't we get bands of oceans? Wouldn't the oceans start to clump up towards the equator? Unless the gravity is so strong that it would actually completely counteract centrifugal force. So to your point, why do we have oceans on the North and South Pole on a globe why do we have oceans there at all if the oceans should very quickly find their way, towards the point of centrifugal force?
There isn't an ocean at the South Pole. It's not an ocean. It's surrounded by ocean. But,
you know what I mean. I mean, the North Pole has an ocean, so
yes.
But I see where he's going. I'm sorry. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. What was your other thing?
That's okay. Another question I had is, there's certain rivers on Earth that flow north to south, and a couple of these rivers are over 3,000 miles an hour. Now, if the curvature formula is correct,
3,000 miles long. He was just nervous.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. A little nervous. Those rivers should be flowing technically two directions. They should be, but yet they're not. And I was just wondering, kind of what you thought about that.
Hey, I know where there's a river that there's a place in St. John, New Brunswick, which has the reversing falls. The St. John River comes down and into the Bay of Fundy. But the tides in the Bay of Fundy are so high that when the tides go back the other way, the water goes up the falls. And they post the times when you can observe this happening, which sounds a little nuts, but it's true. I've been there. There is a reversing falls. The water goes backwards, if you want to call it that. Up instead of down.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I do know
St. John, New Brunswick.
Okay.
What?
I think it's the one I was talking about. I think it's called the Paraguay, and I think there's parts of the Nile that actually flow north and south that should, according to the curvature formula we're given, it makes no sense whatsoever. There should reach a point where it just all of a sudden, you could just walk out into that river and just stand there, and you won't be tugged either way. Similar to like digging a hole down to China. Once you get halfway, you would just kind of stop right in the middle of the air and levitate. I kind of find that's strange.
That does sound strange to me too.
What else you got?
The last question I had is just, I spent a lot of time out at sea fishing, and lighthouses, I've seen them 60, 80, 90, sometimes 100 miles away. And I once again, with the curvature, is there any way you can explain to me how that's possible? I know you can say light bends, but, I've seen people at the base during the day. At the base of the lighthouse during the day, I shouldn't see somebody standing there because they're not bending. And that's 100 miles away, and I'm seeing them with high-powered telescopes that are hooked to the side of the fishing boat. Do you know any reason, the magical reason why I should be able to see that?
No, not particularly. The skies are clear. I don't know where you live. They're not that clear where I live.
Well, I think
100 miles is nothing out of 25,000 miles.
Right, but at the rate of the curvature, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but the way I'm understanding it, at 100 miles, we should have, I don't know what, like 1,800 feet of curvature?
At 100 miles, you can hear me?
Yes.
100 miles, it is, no, it's way more than that. 100 miles is 6,700 feet. So it's a mile and a quarter.
I'm having trouble with that. With the 25,000 mile circumference,
yeah,
100
but
miles is only one part in 25.
But only an 8,000 mile radius. So
so that's 20. It's over. It's what is the circumference of the Earth is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it's 25,000 miles around, but it doesn't matter because for this you really only care about radius. So, because if you go out roughly, it's 3,959, but we'll round it up to 4,000. Because once you get out 4,000 miles, it goes, if it's a sphere, then it goes completely vertical. So, yeah, it starts really shallow. So at 50 miles, it's only 1,700 feet, but at 100 miles, it's 7,000 feet. And it just gets getting worse to there until when you get at 4,000 miles, it becomes infinite. See, kind of, maybe.
I'll have to draw that out.
Okay. But again, it's not, this isn't the flat earth math. This is straight from, we just grabbed this out of a textbook. So it's but the point is,
Textbooks
as
have been wrong too.
well, of course, and Wiki doesn't even, it's funny because when you look up the curvature on Wiki, it only says 8 inches per mile, which is not true. That's just like stairs. That's just a slope. It has to get worse, on a curve. But yeah, 8 inches per mile squared is generally what everyone's kind of. It took us a while to nail that down in the beginning, but that's what everyone kind of agrees at now.
I think we have Jonathan on with us, and he had a couple of questions.
Yeah, how you doing, guys?
Good.
Hey,
How
Jonathan.
are you?
Good. I just want to. I'm sorry, I won't tax you like these gentlemen are. But I do want to thank you for the years of. I don't want to say entertainment. I want to say education too. All the years you've been on air. But like yourself, I'd like to think I look at things with a more skeptical viewpoint and look for the science and sound logic in things. I may have worked with somebody you knew back in the day who worked for Bigelow, Dr. Bruce Cornett, when he used to go up to Pine Bush, New York.
Yes.
Okay, and so studying anomalies in the sky, you really have to do constant research. And even then, like you said before, when you guys turned it towards UFOs and space, you still can't definitively say, what is it, right?
Well, if you get an abduction case like the Betty and Barney Hill case, it's pretty clear what it is. And especially when you got somebody like Dr. Benjamin Simon, who did the hypnosis work, 10 sessions, each of 2 people separately, and you got the world-class expert on trying to recover shell shock war veterans, post-traumatic stress disorder, I guess, if we want to get fancy. Mm-hmm. But here's a guy who wrote the book. He ran a hospital with 3,000 beds for people who'd had war veterans who had traumatic experiences. Your buddy's head gets blown off next to you. It's a little hard to recover easily from that experience. But Dr. Simon said with the Hills that the emotional intensity of their recounting of their experience under his controlled hypnosis was every bit as strong as that of the shell shock war veterans. Mm-hmm. And that, coming from him, that means something. From any dum-dum physicist, any dum-dum hypnotist, it doesn't mean anything. But coming from a guy who was in the movie, the Army made a movie, Let There Be Light, starring Benjamin Simon, about how he got people who'd had these. We're getting people coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth with PTSD these days. They used to die, but now they survive. But and so that one case, if no others, in other words, there's no question about what happened there. Is what I'm saying. I'm saying there are many sightings that you can't explain because you don't know what they are. You don't have enough data.
Right.
But you got 4,000 physical trace cases, and they get dull. After you read the first 200 of people seeing something less than 100 yards away, it's on or near the ground, and after it leaves, you find physical changes, and it was a damn saucer shaped craft. Not always, but mostly. Then you've got something to work with. I'm not. Lights in the sky don't move me at all.
Right.
I really don't care about them. But the radar visual cases, and there are other good cases. So again, the question isn't, are all UFOs alien spacecraft? Of course not. The question is, are any? And the answer is yes. And, it's like the basketball coach knows that most people aren't 7 feet tall. Probably 99.5% people aren't 7 feet tall. He says, give me one. I don't care about the midgets. So the one guy makes the difference. And so with UFOs, we've got a good solid base of data that the nasty, noisy negativists never talk about, which I find very fascinating, that part of it too.
The reason I bring that up is because with your own research, if you just look in the past 200 years alone, right, what you said earlier about NASA and about calling certain gentlemen liars, I personally think a lot of those men were men of integrity and they had a job to do, right? They had a mission. It was in a military capacity, NASA being, an extension of the Department of Navy, if that's correct?
No, it is not. NASA is not a military organization, supposedly.
But it has influence now.
Oh, influence? Yeah, I suppose it does. I would think.
To my understanding, NASA is an arm of the Department of Defense.
No, it is not.
I'm gonna have
I didn't mean to upset you in my faux pas. That was just my understanding. But if not, let's just say a lot of the men that were drawn for these programs, just like Mark had mentioned in The Right Stuff, they were test
all
pilots.
The pilots. Yeah, all of the pilots, I think, had military pilot training.
Right. So in that sense,
that's right.
They're carrying out a mission. They're not really there to speak on behalf of whether it's NASA or whatever. They understand the parameters of the mission. They're carrying them out. And what I'm getting at is NASA as an organization, if you look at the past 200 years of Earth's history, coming into really 1850, we supposedly went from the steam engine to Nikola Tesla to the nuclear age to computers and now nanotechnology. And for a certain...
That's all of them since 1900.
Right? Okay. So follow me here for a moment. With that, there's a great responsibility when you have the Earth's population going from 1 billion people in 1800 to the present 7+ billion people. You have to not only manage resources, but if you're saying, and I'm not saying that you are, if anybody says that aliens are real or if the UFO abduction case is real or any of this, there's a greater responsibility to the societal whole of the world and keeping certain things secret until we've gotten to a level of sophistication like we are at now with computers and the internet and people waking up to possibly keeping these things under wrap. Because look, if you remember, what's his name, Orson Welles with the War of the Worlds. He did a simple radio broadcast and people lost it. Sci-fi movies, same thing.
Well, a few people lost it. Look, I'm not saying there is a cover-up, and I have a whole chapter on the UFO why questions in Flying Saucers and Science.
Right.
And one of the big questions is why the cover-up? And I get 5 reasons for that, which makes sense to me anyway.
Right.
One is you want to figure out how the things work, because they make wonderful weapons delivery and defense systems. And you got crash saucers, so you run good lab tests, but you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. Second problem is if the other guy figures out how they work before you do, how do you defend against them? You don't want them to know, they know, you know. I mean, we've been playing this game for a very long time. But the third problem is maybe bigger. If you were to make an announcement that indeed planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft, what would happen? Church attendance would go up, mental hospital admissions would go up, the stock market would go down, because anything that rocks the boat makes the stock market go down. But I think one of the biggest things that would happen, 2 things. The younger generation would start to think of themselves as an earthling instead of all those nationalistic labels. And we live on a planet where nationalism is the only game in town. No government wants its citizens to owe their allegiance to the planet instead of that individual government. And governments are very defensive. We're spending $1 trillion this year on things military.
Not even the UN. Not even the UN with a flat Earth map, right? That's their logo.
No. I mean, $1 trillion is a lot of dough, where I come from anyway. There are other reasons. The fundamentalists would be very upset because, as I said, they said that all the intelligent life in the universe is right on, at least in the galaxy, is right on planet Earth. And this UFO work is the work of the devil, they say.
Well, I want to say one more thing, and again, I know I didn't want to tax you, but I agree with a lot of what you said tonight. One of which was your explanation or your brief summary of gravity, and you kind of chuckled at that. You didn't want to go into it. I think Tesla didn't refer to it as gravity, but density. And so when people talk about the curvature of water or water bending, I have to tell them this. Now, I've seen these arguments made in the flat Earth movement, but that people are basing their logic on being on terra firma, on flat land. Whereas water has a certain density that, as you go down in fathoms, you sink, right? Just like a heavy weight. If you tie it around your ankle or a cement block, you'll sink deeper and deeper into the ocean. So water kind of bends, if you want to say that, or curves and forms to whatever the container it's in. That's all I'm going to say there as far as the curvature goes. It's not on flat level ground as it reaches out to the horizon. The ocean is not flat in that sense. And so I'm just going from the model that where Tesla called gravity density in his explanation. That's all I'm going to say there.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Tesla was a genius. Of course, remember the famous question, where's the meter going to go? When
Exactly.
Tesla talked about getting free electricity. And J.P. Morgan, who was supporting some of his research, asked that little question. Where's the meter going to go? And if you're going to make it free, he didn't want any part of it.
Well, if I could just tax you, if I could tax you with one question, if I could just ask that you do possibly check out Mark Sargent's Flat Clues, because I think he puts it more concisely and eloquently, and I think somebody like yourself is very necessary and needed at this juncture in the Flat Earth movement, because I think you can bring some sound logic to it, and you say this is very accurate, and this is kind of, this needs more examination. So thank you for coming on tonight. I'm gonna give you guys back to each other.
15 more minutes.
You don't have to keep him. Seriously, I feel bad because I'm on the West Coast.
Thank you for your questions.
I'm on the Atlantic time zone.
I know.
I'm
You're
4 hours ahead.
Yeah, nobody is in the Atlantic time zone. You're the only person I've ever known to actually be there.
Well, everything east of Maine is in the Atlantic time zone. Look, if you want a strange time zone, you go to Newfoundland, and they're a half hour ahead of us.
Ooh, that's creepy.
That is weird.
Well, that's the way it is. I'm sorry.
Is there a name for it?
Atlantic time zone.
No. Half an hour ahead of you. It's still just Atlantic?
No, you're right. It's Newfoundland time.
Newfoundland time. Okay.
I noticed that in Australia too while I was programming some stuff. They have a time zone that's 30 minutes ahead, which is weird. How do you account for that? But anyways, let's wrap it up, since we do only have we only have about 10 minutes left, because the broadcast ends at the 57. So, Mark, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Check it out. It's a very polarizing discussion. I don't expect anybody to get it in a day. You can either Google Flat Earth Clues or just go to YouTube and type in Flat Earth. It doesn't have to be my stuff, although my stuff is a pretty good introduction to it. And, I enjoyed the debate very, very much, or discussion, or whatever you want to call it, with Stanton. Thank you. I couldn't have dreamed that I would have been doing a debate like this 10 months ago.
I think it was fantastic, and I wouldn't even call it a debate. It's definitely a discussion,
No.
and I hope that it didn't disappoint people out there. I think people are expecting boxing gloves in all of this, but we really need to sit down and put our heads together. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about putting confirmation bias to the side and finding the truth and philosophizing and all of that. Stanton, what are your thoughts so far? Are you going to research the flat Earth topic now?
Well, I'm going to look some more, so the next time I'll have killer arguments.
But they raise some
And at
pretty
least-
good points, I should say. I mean, a lot of people think it's
Well-
just a bunch of idiots who just fall for anything, but there's really some valid points that are being made.
I was intrigued in looking up some historical stuff, realizing I hadn't realized that long before Columbus, it was widely assumed that the Earth was round, a sphere. And some guys measured the measurements. Some guy measured it 2,000 years ago or more. But Columbus, unfortunately, didn't have the right measurements, and he didn't have enough victuals to get him any further. It's a good thing he ran into a continent. So I was intrigued with that, which I didn't know. And there's strong religious arguments dealing with this subject, which I hadn't been aware of. What I want to leave people with is the need for polite discussion, which we've had tonight, I think.
Yeah.
Because we disagree doesn't mean we need to be disagreeable. And for anybody who's interested more about UFOs, I would give my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, because it lists my books, which when I send out are all autographed, which you can't get from Amazon. And I'd also, if any of the people listening are insiders on the UFO scene, military guys who know about stuff that happened that nobody's talked about, and, my website has my email address, and I'm not soliciting violations of national security. But you got any stories to tell, I'd like to listen to them. And some people have none of the original Roswell witnesses, as far as I know, are still alive. But some of them may have left pieces of wreckage to their grandkids. And so I'd like to hear about them if there's anybody out there. It would be nice to have a piece of something to take to a lab of my choosing and get test run. And so there's more to the story. The UFO story is a big story, and it has to do with a lot of things, just as this flat Earth thing does, about not just facts and data, but what does it mean? What are the implications? And certainly there are implications for religion and for politics, if you will. How can we get this planet not to spend $1 trillion on things military because of all the warfare, the hate, let's kill the other guy. I try to put myself in the place of aliens looking at this planet. And the simplest description I can give is a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. A lot of kids died of starvation yesterday and the day before and the day before that, and we're spending $1 trillion on things military. That bothers the heck out of me. I have a great-grandson. I'd like him to grow up in a peaceful world. Sure doesn't look like it right now. That's my message for the night.
Wow, that's beautiful. And that's the goals of Truth Frequency Radio as well. We hope to leave this place in a better place that we found it, in a better state that we found it, whether it's flat or a globe or a dome or any of this. And if it is a dome, that's all the more reason to make sure that this place is kept in the best possible state, because we only have one. And I had these two fish. They were Oscar fish, and they were actually a little smarter than most fish. They would recognize me, but when I would walk by, and they would start picking up rocks and throwing it at the glass to try to get my attention when they wanted something to eat. It was amazing. But when I would leave, they would tear up all of the air, all of the air tubes. They would uproot the plants. They would make a complete mess of it. And I would go in there almost every night and put everything back together. But it seems like that's what we're doing to our fishbowl. We keep uprooting all the plants. We keep tearing up the air system and everything. And we're going to see our demise if we don't get it together.
You're right.
That is what it's all about.
Interesting evening.
It has been, definitely. So again, thank you very much for your time this evening, Stanton. And any new work in progress?
Yeah, Kathleen Martin and I are working on another book. I can't tell you the details about it, but should have it in 6 months.
Is it a matter of national security?
No, but publishers don't want us to talk about it.
Oh, I understand.
You got to do what your publisher says, or he won't publish it.
That sounds kind of like Flat Club. First rule is you don't talk about Flat Club.
Well, what can I say? I'm an optimist. We'll get the book out, and then we can talk about it. It'll make some people angry.
Excellent. Well, when it comes out, let's have you on the broadcast for sure.
Okay.
Excellent.
Good show.
Thanks for your time. Have a great evening.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Night, Mark.
Hey, night, Stanton. Nice talking to you.
Thank you very much for tuning in this evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are just about at the end of the broadcast, about 4 minutes left, and I think that was great.
I thought it was great too.
Yeah, the back and forth was amazing. It turned out way better than I thought it would.
Yeah, me too. It wasn't just educational and informational. It was also a lot of fun. So I think everybody had a lot of fun.
Right, definitely. Yeah. So what's coming up on Strange World?
We're going to probably pre-record it because I've got a Jimmy Church interview on, excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse now, on Tuesday.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm always looking for, like Stanton was reaching out, I'm always looking for people to come forward, especially in the professional sector, the military sector. Anybody who wants to come out and talk about, even if we've already talked about the subject, another pilot, another Navy guy, another Army guy, I'll take all comers. So
excellent. And Jonathan, what's coming up on Perceptions?
I was thinking of doing a Christmas call-in show because it falls that night. I'm not celebrating anything special. I do want to have an end-of-the-year, predictions show. I didn't know if Mark was going to do the same or do something, but it'd be interesting to hear people's predictions for 2016.
I'll do it.
Really? I would have thought you celebrated Hanukkah.
No, Festivus actually on the 22nd. I got to set the Festivus poll.
Festivus for the rest of us.
Excellent.
Nice.
Excellent. You know what I've realized lately, and what are your thoughts on this, Mark, is that it really doesn't matter whether it's flat or a globe. What matters is the fact that people are elevating their consciousness to the point to where they're questioning it. And that, I think, just speaks volumes for the human species.
Agreed. We still don't know exactly what the map looks like, exactly. And it's and I kind of talked about this in the beginning, where the enthusiasm from all these different camps, it's like, no, it's this, no, it's this. That shows you the level of intensity that's getting behind this. You're absolutely right. It's not that we know, we're trying to define it, but nobody knows exactly how to define it yet. So it's the whole Monty Python Life of Brian thing, when Brian drops his shoe and everybody's trying to define the meaning of the dropping of the shoe. That's what everyone's doing here. But you're right. People are elevating. They're waking up to this wherever we are. Call it the 100th monkey effect or the million human effect. It's real. It's happening. It is not going away. And I love the debates at this point.